The gas lamps flickered low in the Egyptian hall of the British Museum, their yellow glow barely piercing the unnatural chill that had settled over the ancient relics like a pall. It was the witching hour of November 3rd, 1893, and Constable Harold Jenkins paced the marble floor, his boots echoing hollowly amid the towering sarcophagi and jackal-headed statues. 27 fellow guards had fanned out across the vast chamber just minutes before, their lanterns bobbing like fireflies in the gloom. Now silence gripped the air, broken only by a distant drip of water from some cracked urn. Jenkins paused near the obsidian heart case, its jeweled contents glinting malevolently. A whisper slithered through the shadows, soft, like papyrus unrolling in a pharaoh's tomb. He spun, lantern raised. "Show yourself. This is no place for pranks." His voice cracked, swallowed by the oppressive weight of carved gods staring down with unblinking eyes. From the far end, near the colossal Ramses Colossus, a low moan rose as if the stone itself breathed. Jenkins bolted toward it, pulse thundering in his ears. Shouts erupted from his comrades, sharp, frantic, then snuffed out one by one. Lanterns clattered to the floor, flames guttering in an icy draught that carried the faint scent of desert sand and myrrh. He reached the center aisle, where the Rosetta Stone stood sentinel, empty. No boots scuffing, no brass buttons flashing, just swirling motes of dust illuminated by his lone light. Panic clawed at his throat. He backed away, lantern trembling, until his heel struck something soft, a fallen cap embroidered with the museum's insignia. Then, from the darkness behind Anubis, eyes gleamed, not human, but amber and ancient, fixed upon him. The light in his hand sputtered, extinguished, and Harold Jenkins was alone no more, or perhaps never again. Dawn broke grey and sodden over London, the fog muffling the clamour as Scotland Yard swarmed Great Russell Street. Inspector Tobias Gregson, ruddy-faced and side-whiskered, barked orders to constables cordoning off the museum's grand entrance. His rumpled suit hung heavy with damp, mirroring the dread knotting his gut. 28 guards vanished without a trace, doors locked from inside, no windows breached, not a drop of blood or sign of struggle. Whispers of curse rippled through the crowd, Egyptian maledictions unearthed from King Tut's forgotten vaults, now hungry for modern souls. Inside 221B Baker Street, Sherlock Holmes lay sprawled in his armchair, the hypodermic syringe still dangling from his vein like a serpent's fang. The 7% solution coursed through him, dulling the infernal boredom that gnawed at his brilliant mind. His gaunt frame, draped in a threadbare dressing gown, trembled faintly. Piercing grey eyes stared vacant at the ceiling, shadowed by unruly dark curls. Cocaine whispers promised escape from the void, but delivered only hollow echoes. Watson's medical bag sat untouched on the sideboard, a silent accusation from his old friend. The door burst open. Dr. John Watson, sturdy and mustachioed, limped in from his morning rounds, blue eyes wide with urgency. He clutched a crumpled telegram, his tweed suit flecked with rain. "Holmes, for God's sake, put that away. Gregson's summoning you to the British Museum. 28 night watchmen. Gone. Vanished into thin air inside the Egyptian hall." Holmes withdrew the needle with languid precision, a ghost of a smile curling his thin lips. He capped it, set it aside without rising. Vanished, Watson, or merely misplaced in the fog of superstition? Gregson, that plodding fool, reeks of desperation. Pray, elaborate. Watson paced, his limp from the Afghan bullet more pronounced in agitation. They were last seen at midnight patrol. Morning shift found the hall empty, lanterns smashed, caps scattered, but no bodies, no forced entry. The press is howling, Pharaoh's curse. Relics from a cursed tomb arrived last month, sarcophagi sealed with spells, they say. Gregson's half convinced himself. Holmes's eyes sharpened, the cocaine haze parting like mist before wind. He rose fluidly, all 7 feet of angular intensity, shrugging into his Inverness cape. The deerstalker perched atop his head like a crown of intellect. Curses, Watson, the refuge of the incompetent. Every miracle crumbles under observation. Yet, 28 men. Intriguing arithmetic. Inside, a flicker stirred, the old hunger for puzzle over poison, But deeper, unacknowledged, lurked the emptiness. Cases solved, villains caged. Yet his soul adrift, untouched by the divine spark others professed. The hansom cab rattled them through fog-choked streets, horse hooves clopping on wet cobblestones. London reeked of coal smoke and horse dung, imperial grandeur rotting at its edges. Watson glanced sidelong. "You're pale, Holmes. That needle again. It's destroying you." Holmes puffed his curved pipe, aromatic tobacco veiling his retort. "Destruction implies value to destroy, my dear doctor. Boredom is the true assassin." He fell silent, mind racing ahead to deductions. Wind patterns, residue traces, human frailty masked as magic. The British Museum loomed, its ionic columns stark against the gloom. They descended into the Egyptian Hall, Stanhope's Folly, named for its architect, a cavern of shadowed opulence. Towering obelisks from Karnak pierced the vaulted ceiling, sarcophagi lined the walls, lids askew as if roused mid-slumber. Gas jets hissed faintly, illuminating hieroglyphs that danced like living script. The air hung heavy with dust motes and an exotic tang, sandalwood perhaps, or older spices. Gregson bustled forward, bushy whiskers quivering. "Mr. Holmes, thank Christ we've poured every inch. No tunnels, no secret panels, just this." He thrust forward a brass whistle etched with a scarab. Holmes took it, lenses magnifying the surface. Guard's issue, fingerprints smudged, multiple handlers in panic. And here. He knelt by the Rosetta Stone, inhaling deeply. Desert sand, anomalous in Bloomsbury, imported with the new shipment. From the wings emerged Dr. Elias Hawthorne, the frail curator in his 60s, wire-rimmed spectacles perched on a beaked nose, white hair powdered like an ancient regime ghost. His velvet smoking jacket whispered as he approached, voice quavering with reverence and fear. "Indeed, Mr. Holmes, the tomb of Akhenaten's scribe, unveiled last fortnight. Inscriptions warn of Anubis claiming the unworthy. These men, they mocked the old gods." Holmes snorted softly, rising to prowl the hall. His hawkish gaze dissected, scuff marks converging toward the Anubis statue, faint residue like frost on marble. Condensation? No. Crystalline, saline. A cap lay abandoned, its owner imagined fleeing spectral hounds. "Superstition thrives in ignorance, Doctor. Men do not vanish, they are concealed." "Watson, note the draft. Chimney flue unsealed." Watson scribbled, brow furrowed. "Holmes, even you must admit the timing. All lights out simultaneously, as if—" "Coordinated," Holmes interjected, voice steel. He traced a glyph on the nearest sarcophagus, jackal head, scales of judgment. A chill unrelated to the draft prickled his skin. For an instant, the stone seemed warmer, pulsing faintly. Imagination fueled by narcotics. Gregson mopped his brow. If not curse, what? Motive? The relics are priceless, but no theft. Holmes paused at the heart case, obsidian gleaming. Inside, a shriveled organ floated in resin, labeled "Weighed and Found Wanting." His reflection stared back, gaunt, hollow-cheeked, eyes betraying the abyss within. Rock-bottom whispered, "Solver of enigmas, slave to vice." This case might redeem or drag him deeper. Hawthorne leaned close, breath minty with absinthe. The ancients believed no soul beyond Mayat's balance, truth and order. Disrupt it, and chaos devours. Holmes turned, dismissive yet intrigued. Order is deduction, not divinity. But as he spoke, his boot crunched on something overlooked, a single grain of sand, glowing faintly under gaslight, etching itself into memory. Outside, thunder grumbled, promising storms. Watson touched his arm. "What now?" Holmes's mind whirred. "We exhume the truth. But first, the guard's logs. And, Doctor, pray this is mere sleight of hand, for if not—" He trailed off, the hall's shadows lengthening as if listening. Somewhere in the relic's depths, a soft rasp echoed, like stone grinding awake. What had truly claimed the 28, and would it hunger for more? This story is created by a young creator whose dream is to reach 1,000 subscribers. If you enjoy these tales, subscribing helps more than you know, and he thanks you for it. Dive into mysteries that challenge your mind and reward attention. The gas lamps flickered as if gasping for breath, casting elongated shadows that danced across the sarcophagi like restless spirits. Sherlock Holmes froze, his keen ears attuned to that faint rasp, a sound too deliberate to be the settling of ancient stone. Watson's hand tightened on his revolver, hidden beneath his tweed jacket, while Gregson spun toward the noise, his bulldog face paling under the ruddy flush. "Did you hear that?" Watson whispered, his voice a threadbare hush amid the hall's oppressive silence. Holmes raised a hand, silencing them. His mind catalogued, not wind through cracks, not rats in the walls. Stone on stone, deliberate, as if something immense shifted beneath the floor. He stepped forward, boots echoing softly on the marble, toward the obsidian case where the heart relic brooded. The air grew thicker here, laced with the dry scent of millennia-old dust and something sharper, ozone, like a storm trapped indoors. Hawthorne clutched his velvet lapels, spectacles glinting. The curator's frail frame trembled, but his eyes burned with a fanatic gleam. That noise. "It's happened before, Mr. Holmes." Whispers from the tombs. The guards spoke of it nights when the fog rolled thick off the Thames. "Superstition's lullaby," Holmes replied crisply, though his pulse betrayed him, hammering against the cocaine's fading grip. He knelt, magnifying glass in hand, scanning the floor. No seams, no trapdoors. Yet the sand grain from earlier mocked him, now joined by others, fine as flour, trailing from the case's base like a breadcrumb from Anubis himself. Gregson cleared his throat, bravado cracking. Scotland Yard's swept this place thrice. Nothing. But the logs? Come, they're in the antechamber. Perhaps your methods will unearth what ours buried. They moved as a cluster, Hawthorne leading with a lantern that swung like a pendulum, marking time's inexorable tick. Holmes lagged, his thoughts fracturing. The rasp echoed his own inner grinding, 7% solution wearing thin, nights blurred in Baker Street's haze, Watson's worried glances piling like unanswered telegrams. He had solved the speckled band, the red-headed league, but this void 28 men erased, gnawed at reason's foundation. Was this his unraveling, a case too vast for deduction? The antechamber was a cramped vault of oak desks and iron cabinets, smelling of ink and mildew. Gas jets hissed to life under Gregson's match, illuminating ledgers bound in cracked leather. Watson settled into a chair, rubbing his old wound, the Afghan bullet a perpetual ache mirroring the night's chill. Holmes seized the chief log, pages yellowed, entries in meticulous copperplate. Guard rotations. Thompson first, burly ex-soldier, noted unsettling quiet at 10 sharp. Wilkins followed, scribbling, "Shadows moved unnatural before his shift's end." All 28 vanished between 11 and midnight, lights snuffed as one. No screams, no struggle. Holmes' fingers flew, cross-referencing. "Patterns emerge," he murmured. "All stationed near the Duat exhibit. Underworld relics. And here, each log ends mid-sentence. Felt watched. Cold breath on neck." Coincidence? Or the curse, Hawthorne breathed, hovering like a spectre. The hall's heart is the weighing chamber. Pharaoh's vizier unearthed it in 89 from Tutmosis' tomb. Inscribed, "Those who disturb the car shall join the devoured." Car, the soul's double, restless if unbalanced. Watson shifted uncomfortably. Holmes' the men were devout. Thompson attended St. Paul's, Wilkins a Methodist. If faith couldn't anchor them. "Faith is opium for the fearful," Holmes snapped, sharper than intended. But inwardly, doubt slithered. His own faith in morphine had anchored nothing. It had moored him to 221B's sofa, violin wailing laments while London burned unsolved cases. Watson's loyalty alone had hauled him back time and again. Was this the clarity, the rock bottom where genius met abyss? Gregson snorted, flipping a page. Motives key. Foreign agents, anarchists, the museum's rivals covet those relics. Holmes's eyes narrowed on a marginal note, faint pencil. H.H. lingered post-closing. "Initials. Hawthorne?" The curator stiffened. "I catalogued late." "Routine." Liar's hesitation, Holmes noted mentally. But before pursuit, a thunderclap shook the museum, rain lashing windows like accusatory fingers. Lightning clawed the sky, illuminating the antechamber in stark white, and there, on the ledger's edge, a fresh smudge of sand. "Enough dallying," Holmes declared, snapping the book shut. "We reconstruct the night. Watson, you as Thompson at the sarcophagus. Gregson, Wilkins by the obelisk. Hawthorne, narrate the hour." They positioned under dim light, shadows merging into grotesque forms. Holmes paced, directing like a conductor of chaos. 11 o'clock, fog dense, gas lamps guttering. Guards yawn. Yawn now, men, then. "What?" Watson feigned a stretch, voice gruff as Thompson's might be. "Felt it then, sir." Air turned heavy, like breathing sand. Looked up, sarcophagus lid seemed ajar. Holmes examined the prop sarcophagus, lid sealed tight. Yet imagination supplied the gap, a sliver of darkness exhaling. He pressed his palm flat, warm again, unnaturally so. "Cocaine's echo," or... Gregson grumbled his line. Shadows stretched, unnatural. Heard rasping, like stone shifting. Turned, gone. "Precisely," Holmes agreed, mind alight. "Coordinated hallucination? Gas leak-inducing visions?" But Hawthorne's voice dropped, almost reverent. "The Duat texts warn of Amit, the devourer. She consumes hearts unworthy at Mayat's scale. These guards, rumors of gambling debts, stolen trinkets from exhibits, unbalanced souls." Holmes whirled. Rumors. Evidence. The curator averted his eyes, but Holmes pounced, pinning him against the cabinet. "Speak plainly, Doctor." "You knew their vices?" Hawthorne wilted. "Petty corruptions, but the relics sense it. The sand. It's from the excavation." "Cursed soil," Watson interjected gently. "Holmes, ease off." Man's shaken. Holmes relented, but turmoil churned. His own vices, hypodermic scars hidden under sleeves, mirrored those guards. Was he weighing his heart next? The rasp returned louder from the hall beyond. They rushed back, lanterns bobbing. In the weighing chamber's center, the obsidian case gleamed. Holmes approached, breath shallow. Inside, the shriveled heart bobbed subtly, resin swirling as if stirred. Impossible. Then etched on the glass, not there before, faint script, 28 weighed, found wanting. Gasps rippled. Gregson's hand flew to his crucifix, Watson's to his wound. Holmes touched the etching, cold, real, fresh scraped. "Not slight," he whispered, pulse roaring. "This defies." A low moan undulated through the hall, stone grinding deeper, as if the floor breathed. Sand sifted from cracks unseen, forming a trail toward the shadowed alcove where the Duat idol lurked, jackal-headed, scales poised. Hawthorne crossed himself. The devourer awakens. Holmes's rational fortress cracked, cocaine crash nausea rising. For the first time, reason faltered, whispering of forces beyond vials and logic. Watson gripped his shoulder. "Steady, old chap." But as thunder roared anew, Holmes stared into the idol's eyes, glowing faintly, and wondered if his own soul teetered on that scale. What if the vanishings were judgment, and he the next to balance? The moan swelled, sand piling like a noose tightening. Something ancient stirred, hungry for the 29th. Holmes's fingers trembled against the cold glass of the obsidian case, the etched words burning into his vision like acid on flesh. 28 weighed, found wanting. The air in the Egyptian hall thickened, heavy with the scent of ancient dust and something sharper, metallic, like blood long dried. The moan's echo lingered, vibrating through the flagstones, raising the fine hairs on his neck. He pulled back, forcing his breath steady, but the cocaine's bitter aftertaste soured his throat, a reminder of the needle's kiss he craved even now. Watson stepped closer, his limp more pronounced in the dim gaslight flickering from wall sconces. "Holmes, we must get you out of here. Your color's ghastly." "No," Holmes murmured, eyes locked on the jackal-headed idol in the shadowed alcove. Its eyes, onyx surely, seemed to pulse with an inner fire, casting elongated shadows that writhed like serpents across the sandstone floor. Sand continued to sift, unbidden, forming rivulets that pointed accusingly toward their feet. "This is no time for retreat. Gregson, secure the doors. Hawthorne, your keys, now." The inspector fumbled with his whistle, ruddy cheeks paling as he nodded vigorously. "Aye, Mr. Holmes. But mark me, this ain't natural. My gran spoke of such things, old Pharaoh's wrath crossing the seas." He lumbered toward the massive oak doors, their iron hinges groaning as he bolted them shut, the sound final, claustrophobic. Dr. Hawthorne clutched his velvet lapels, spectacles slipping down his nose. "The Duat idol, Mr. Holmes. Anubis, guardian of the scales. It hasn't stirred like this since the shipment arrived from Luxor last Michaelmas. 28 guards on night shift that eve, all vanished between 11 and dawn. No screams, no traces, save the sand trails leading here." Holmes paced the weighing chamber, cape swirling, mind racing to reclaim logic from the chaos. Sand trails, consistent with disturbance, perhaps a hidden mechanism. Vices among the men, gambling, pilfering. Motive for silencing them? A rival collector or internal grudge? But the heart inside the case bobbed again. Resin clouds parting to reveal veins of crimson within the desiccated organ. His stomach twisted. Hallucination from withdrawal? No, the others saw it too. Watson cleared his throat, voice steady as ever. "Elias, you mentioned cursed soil. From which tomb?" Hawthorne's frail hands gestured to towering obelisks inscribed with hieroglyphs, their surfaces pitted by millennia. Tutankhamun's antechamber, though unconfirmed. The workers unearthed it under full moon, bad omen. Amit's heart, they called this relic, devourer of the dead. Weighs souls against Ma'at's feather, if heavy with sin. "Superstition," Holmes snapped, but his voice cracked, betraying him. He knelt by a sand trail, magnifying glass in hand, inhaling the dry, acrid scent. Silica grains, uniform, imported, not local, yet fresh, as if poured moments ago. He traced it to the alcove, where the idol loomed 7 feet tall, black diorite polished to a mirror sheen. Up close, the jackal's maw grinned, fangs chipped but lethal in intent. A faint inscription at its base, hieroglyphs spelling judgment. Gregson crossed to him, crucifix glinting on his chain. "Seen enough? We summon the yard in force at first light. Pray it holds till then, pray," Holmes echoed, a bitter laugh escaping. "To what, your Christian god or this pagan beast?" He touched the idol's pedestal, warm, unnaturally so. A heat source below, pipes, geothermal anomaly from the Thames. But as his palm lingered, a vision assaulted him, unbidden, sharp as shattered glass. Flashback, Baker Street, rain-lashing windows, 7 years past. Cocaine haze lifting just enough to reveal Mary Morstan's letter, unread on the mantel. Watson's wedding, mist, sulking in opium dens of Limehouse, the 7% solution his faithful companion, dulling the void where cases failed, where Irene's shadow lingered. Rock bottom, syringe clattering to floor amid shattered vials, Watson bursting in, face etched with betrayal. "Holmes, you've become the crime, not the solver." He blinked hard back in the hall, sweat beading despite the chill. Watson watched him knowingly, blue eyes soft with unspoken worry. The good doctor had pulled him from that abyss once, with quiet insistence and army surgeon's precision. Grace unearned, much like these relics demanded. Holmes straightened, resolve hardening. "Gentlemen, we camp here tonight. Observe, document. No vanishings on my watch," Hawthorne protested weakly. "Madness. The night deepens the curse. Then enlighten us, Doctor. Full truth. No whispers of rumor." The curator sank onto a marble bench amid sarcophagi lids, propped like silent witnesses, gaslight hollowing his cheeks. "Very well. The guards. Thomas Hale, ringleader. Pocketed scarabs. Sold to fences in Whitechapel. Others followed. Debts to moneylenders. I turned blind eye. Artifacts called for protection, not scandal. But that night, Hale boasted of cracking the Duat idol's secret compartment, claimed gold amulet inside, Pharaoh's own, mocked the gods. By morning, gone. Sand everywhere. Gregson grunted. Corruption breeds its end. Holmes's mind whirred. Secret compartment. Accessible how? He circled the idol, tapping panels. A click, hollow echo. Pressing a paw, a seam parted minutely. Inside, void, but dusted with more sand, and a single feather, Ivory papyrus, pristine. Watson leaned in. Ma'at's feather. Impossible preservation, Holmes breathed. Yet here. His pulse thrummed. If Hale accessed it, why vanish? Blackmail? Accomplices. Thunder rattled the leaded windows. Rain now sheeting down, blurring the world beyond. Fog pressed against panes like spectral fingers. The hall felt alive, breathing, walls etched with faded cartouches seeming to shift in periphery. As midnight tolled from distant St. Paul's, Holmes settled by the obsidian case, pipe clenched unlit. Watson shared a flask of brandy, warmth against the damp stone seeping through his bones. Gregson paced, muttering psalms under breath. Hawthorne dozed fitfully, murmuring Egyptian incantations. Holmes's thoughts turned inward, the crash deepening. His own heart, heavy with injections, deceptions, lives upended by obsession. Watson's loyalty strained, Mycroft's distant disapproval. Was this case mirror, weighing not guards but him? Reason's fortress crumbling, faith's whisper encroaching, not blind belief, but surrender to mystery beyond the lens. A scrape echoed, subtle, from the alcove. They froze. Sand cascaded anew, faster, piling into a crude scale shape on the floor. The shriveled heart floated higher in its case, pulsing. Gregson whispered hoarsely, "It's starting." Holmes rose, lantern high, but nausea surged, vision blurring. In that haze, the idol's eyes flared brighter, and a whisper, not wind, slithered through. 29. He staggered, clutching Watson's arm. "John, if I falter." "You won't," the doctor said firmly. "Not alone." But as the rasp grew to growl, floor trembling, Holmes glimpsed his reflection in the glass, eyes hollow, soul teetering. Clarity pierced, change beckoned, not in vials or victories, but in reaching beyond himself. First step, confide the depths. Yet the growl peaked, sandstorm brewing within walls, and a shadow detached from the idol, formless, hunger incarnate. They braced as it lunged, the night claiming its due. This story echoes lives we've all witnessed, lost souls clawing back from the edge. Comment if you've known someone who found their way back. The shadow uncoiled like smoke from a pharaoh's tomb, tendrils whipping through the chill air of the Egyptian hall, carrying the acrid scent of ancient incense and desert sand. Holmes thrust his lantern forward, its flame sputtering against the unnatural gust, but the formless mass surged, brushing Gregson's shoulder. The inspector yelped, stumbling back into a pedestal where a granite sphinx teetered perilously. Watson lunged to steady it, his bad leg buckling on the slick marble, heart pounding as the cold seeped through his trousers. "Hold fast," Holmes commanded, voice steady despite the vice tightening in his temples. His mind raced, hallucination from fatigue, phosphorescent gas from the relics, or something defying every chemical equation he'd memorized. The shadow recoiled at the light, hissing like steam from a locomotive, then dissolved into wisps that funneled back toward the obsidian case. The pulsing heart within settled, its glow dimming to a sullen ember. Silence crashed down, broken only by their ragged breaths and the relentless patter of rain on the glass dome overhead. Gregson slumped against the wall, crossing himself furtively. "Devil's work," he muttered, wiping sweat from his ruddy brow. "I've seen enough in Whitechapel to know when reason fails." Hawthorne stirred from his chair, spectacles askew, his frail hands trembling as he clutched a crumpled papyrus scroll. "Not the devil, Inspector. Anubis, judge of the dead. That heart, it weighs souls. The guards, their sins too heavy." Holmes ignored them, striding to the case, magnifying glass in hand. The sand on the floor had reformed into perfect scales, balanced now, but flecked with fresh crimson. Blood. No, his vision swam, likely rust from the hinges. He pressed a palm to the glass, cool and unyielding, yet his reflection stared back hollow-cheeked, eyes shadowed by weeks of sleepless deduction. The cocaine haze he'd chased earlier whispered temptations. Clarity, focus, escape from this unraveling. His syringe lay hidden in his coat pocket, a serpent coiled and waiting. Watson approached, flask extended again. A restorative old chap. "You look like death warmed over." Holmes waved it off, but his hand shook. "John," he said quietly, turning so the others couldn't hear. "Last night," I faltered. The needle called louder than the clues. This case, it's burrowing into me. What if the impossible is real? What if my mind, my methods, are the curse? Watson's kind blue eyes softened, moustache twitching with concern. "We've faced Moriarty's web, the hound's shadow. This is fog and fear, Sherlock. Lean on me, on something greater." Greater? Holmes scoffed inwardly, but the words lingered, stirring unease. Faith had always been Watson's quiet anchor, forged in Afghan bullets and battlefield prayers. Holmes had dissected it like a specimen, opium of the masses, yet here, amid crumbling empires of stone, it mocked his fortress of logic. Dawn crept in grey fingers through the grimy panes, illuminating dust motes dancing like lost spirits. They catalogued anew. Boot scuffs aligned perfectly toward the alcove, as if marching into oblivion. A guard's pocket watch stopped at 3:17 a.m., the exact hour of the vanishing. Hawthorne recited from his scroll, "Anubis's right, hearts devoured if unworthy." Gregson scoffed but paled, recounting whispers from the yard, similar vanishings in Cairo digs, workers plucked by unseen hands. "We seal the hall tighter," Holmes declared, rallying them. "No exits unchecked. I'll analyze the sand, trace elements from the Valley of Kings, perhaps doctored phosphors." But as they worked, fatigue clawed deeper. By noon, with constables posted and sandwiches sent from the museum kitchens, stale bread and watery tea, Holmes slipped away to the shadowed corner of the hall, behind a towering obelisk inscribed with hieroglyphs of judgment. His fingers delved into his pocket, retrieving the syringe, its needle glinting like a fang. Just one prick to sharpen the senses drowning in doubt. The venom of addiction surged, familiar euphoria promising dominion over chaos. He hesitated, vial poised. Memories flooded. Irene's ghost, his deceptions to Watson, cases won at the cost of his humanity. The hall's atmosphere thickened, walls seeming to pulse with the idol's malice. A low rasp echoed, not from stone, but within him. 29. His count now. No. He smashed the vial against the obelisk base, glass shattering, liquid seeping into cracks like blood into sand. Pain lanced his palm, a shard embedded, but clarity flickered. Vulnerability, not vials. He wrapped the wound in his handkerchief, blood staining the monogram. Watson found him there, brow furrowed. Another demon slain? For now, Holmes admitted, rising unsteadily. But the tempter returns. "John, if this curse claims me—" "It won't," Watson said firmly, gripping his shoulder. "Remember Reichenbach? You fell but rose renewed. Grace isn't weakness. It's the bridge reason can't build alone. Grace." The word hung, alien yet intriguing. Holmes nodded, masking turmoil. They rejoined the others as Gregson burst in, face ashen, dragging a trembling constable. "Sir," the man babbled, "in the alcove, footprints, fresh, leading to the wall." Then nothing, and my mate heard chanting, Egyptian tongues. Holmes examined. Indeed, boot prints in dust, size 10 vanishing at seamless stone. No mechanism, no drafts. Hawthorne crossed to a bas-relief of Anubis, jackal head snarling. The rite continues. To pass, one must face the heart's truth, unburden sins. "Superstition," Holmes snapped, but doubt gnawed. His own sins weighed, manipulated evidence in the Agra case, lives risked for thrill. Was the curse external, or his mirror? Evening fell, gas lamps hissing to life, casting elongated shadows that danced like spectres. They dined meagerly, cold meats and ale from a hamper, tension coiling. Gregson shared tales of his youth, orphaned in the slums, clinging to rosary beads amid cholera pits. "Even I bent knee once," he confessed gruffly, prayed for a way out. Hawthorne nodded, eyes distant. "Egypt taught me. Gods demand confession. Pharaohs hid sins in tombs, they festered." Watson glanced at Holmes, who stared into his pipe smoke, unlit. Confession. The word echoed his earlier resolve. As thunder grumbled anew, he stood. "Gentlemen," he said, voice raw, "before this night claims more, truths must surface. I've not been honest. The injections, morphine, cocaine, to fuel the mind. It's eroded me, this hall. Its judgment on my hubris." Silence stretched heavy as the fog outside. Watson squeezed his arm supportively. Gregson grunted approval. Hawthorne murmured a blessing in Latin. "Brave first step, lad," the curator said softly. But as relief dawned, the alcove stirred. Sand sifted faster, scales tipping. The heart throbbed crimson, and from the shadows not one but two forms detached, elongated, jackal-masked, whispers multiplying. 29. 30. Holmes's wounded hand throbbed in rhythm. The tempter laughed within, vile shards mocking his fragility. Watson drew his revolver, Gregson his truncheon. Hawthorne clutched his scroll like a shield. They advanced, lights raised into the moor, but Holmes faltered, vision splitting, real shadows or his unraveling soul. One figure solidified, not jackal but a man, gaunt, familiar, eyes gleaming with Moriarty's cunning. No, his own reflection warped, sins incarnate. The figures lunged as one, the hall erupting in chaos, forcing Holmes to confront not just curse, but the abyss within beckoning him back. The shadows surged forward like living ink, jackal heads twisting in the flickering gaslight, their elongated limbs scraping against the stone floor, with a sound like brittle bones grinding underfoot. Holmes stumbled back, his wounded hand pulsing with fire, the morphine vial's shards embedded deeper now, drawing fresh blood that pattered onto the dusty tiles. Watson fired his revolver, the crack echoing through the vaulted hall, but the bullet tore only air, the figures dissolving into sand that swirled mockingly before reforming. Gregson swung his truncheon wildly, connecting with something solid, a fleeting solidity that yielded like wet clay before it reformed, whispering his name in a voice scraped from gravel pits. "Tobias, your badges, your bribes, buried in Whitechapel fog." The inspector roared, face paling beneath his ruddy cheeks, and lunged again, but Holmes grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the alcove's edge. "Not like this," Holmes gasped, breath ragged, the air thick with the metallic tang of his own blood and the acrid bite of gunpowder. "These aren't flesh. They feed on secrets." Hawthorne, the scroll. The curator, frail form trembling yet resolute, unfurled the ancient papyrus higher, his wire-rimmed spectacles glinting as he chanted in halting Coptic, words that hummed against the skin like desert wind. The letters glowed faintly, a pale luminescence pushing back the gloom, and for a heartbeat, the figures recoiled, their masks fracturing into puffs of dust. The scales in the alcove steadied, the crimson heart dimming to a sullen pulse. They retreated into the deeper shadows behind the towering obelisk, but the whispers lingered, coiling around Holmes's mind. 29 awaits, Sherlock. Your 7% solution, injected in Baker Street solitude, veins mapped like the Nile's tributaries. He clutched his hand, vision blurring. Was it pain or the tempter's pull, that vial's promise of clarity, now a siren's call amid the chaos? Watson reloaded with steady hands, his limp forgotten in the adrenaline surge, blue eyes scanning the darkness. "Steady on, Holmes. We've faced worse than Egyptian parlor tricks." But his voice cracked slightly, betraying the war ghosts stirring in his chest, the Afghan dust, the screams of the dying that no logic could silence. They huddled by the sarcophagus, backs to cold granite etched with hieroglyphs of judgment. Hawthorne lowered the scroll, sweat beading on his powdered brow, his velvet jacket torn at the sleeve. That incantation. It's from the Book of the Dead, a ward against the devourer. But it demands purity of intent. Lies weaken it. Gregson spat on the floor, wiping truncheon on his rumpled trousers. Purity? We're Scotland Yard, not saints. Those guards, 28 good men, vanished without trace. If this curse wants confession, I've none left. But his eyes darted to the alcove, where sand still trickled, and Holmes saw the flicker. The slum boy's rosary, clutched in fevered nights, now dismissed but not forgotten. Holmes sank against the sarcophagus, pulse thundering in his ears, the hall's chill seeping through his Inverness cape. His mind raced, deductions fracturing under the strain. The vanishings, not sequential, but patterned. Nights of full moon, guards alone post-closing. Relics moved subtly, sand trails leading to this alcove. And now these manifestations targeting their flaws, not random haunting but orchestrated. By whom? Hawthorne's obsession, or something older, awakened by imperial greed, Pharaoh's gold pried from sands for museum glory. The thought pierced him, his own complicity. Deductions fueled by cocaine haze, cases solved but lives frayed. Moriarty's shadow, not just rival but mirror, the criminal mind he flirted with for the thrill. Confession had bought a reprieve, but the abyss yawned wider. He needed the needle's bite, just once to sharpen the fog. No, a voice within countered. Watson's loyalty, Hawthorne's faith, Gregson's grit anchoring him. He tore a strip from his shirt, binding the hand tighter, ignoring the sting. We seal this alcove. Boards, lamps, create a barrier. Observe till dawn. They worked feverishly. Watson and Gregson prying planks from a crate of lesser artifacts, scarab amulets and linen-wrapped ushabti, nailing them across the alcove mouth with borrowed tools from Hawthorne's kit. Gas lamps ringed the perimeter, their hiss a fragile ward against encroaching dark. Sand ceased falling, the heart stilled, but the air hummed with anticipation, heavy as pre-storm ozone. Hours ticked by in strained vigil. Watson dozed fitfully against a pedestal, revolver in lap, murmuring of Mary in dreams. Gregson paced, muttering about promotions lost to damned mummies. Hawthorne pored over the scroll, translating whispers of afterlife trials, the weighing of the heart against Mahat's feather, devoured if found wanting. Holmes sat cross-legged, pipe clenched unlit. Forcing logic through the haze, patterns emerged. Each guard's personal demon manifested, debts, infidelities, regrets, lured here by whispers in the night. The hall itself, a trap, relics conduits for an entity thriving on unspoken sins. But why now? The new acquisition, a canopic jar arrived last week, lid askew. Inside, not organs, but a desiccated heart pulsing faintly under moonlight. Dawn's grey light filtered through high clerestory windows, fog pressing against panes like spectral breath. The whispers faded, figures unseen. Relief washed over them, tentative. Gregson cracked a flask of brandy, passing it round. We've held. Report to Lestrade. Natural causes, mass hysteria. But Holmes rose, peering at the sealed alcove. Sand gleamed fresh on the floorboard's underside, and etched into the wood faint as breath, 31. His blood chilled. The bindings held no scratches from outside. The message came from within. Watson noticed, face hardening. It's adapting. Learning us. Hawthorne closed the scroll, eyes grave. The devourer doesn't tire. It waits for weakness. Gregson cursed, but Holmes silenced them with a raised hand, mind whirling. The jar. We open it at midday under full light, expose whatever nests there. As they dismantled lamps preparing to venture out for reinforcements, a low rumble stirred from the hall's depths. Not the alcove, but the grand sarcophagus at center, lid shifting imperceptibly. Dust sifted, and a single jackal eye gleamed from the crack, fixing on Holmes with knowing malice. He froze. The tempter's laugh echoing in his skull. Inject, Sherlock. Clarity awaits, or confess deeper, the lives you've toyed with, Watson's devotion spent on your shadows. The eye winked shut, but the pull intensified, his bound hand itching for release. Dawn promised no salvation. The night had only begun its siege on his soul. Outside, carriages clattered on Great Russell Street, oblivious London stirring. But within the Egyptian hall the vice tightened, Holmes's resolve fraying as the entity's hunger mirrored his own unspoken cravings, promising revelations that could shatter them all. The grey light of dawn crept across the Egyptian hall like a thief, illuminating motes of dust that danced in uneasy swirls. Holmes stood transfixed before the grand sarcophagus, its lid a massive slab of polished granite, etched with hieroglyphs that seemed to writhe under scrutiny. The jackal eye had vanished, but its gaze lingered in his mind, a predator's promise. His fingers twitched against the coarse ropes binding his wrists loosely now, a precaution against the syringe hidden in his coat pocket. The itch was no longer subtle, it clawed from within, whispering of crystalline clarity amid the chaos. Watson approached, his limp more pronounced in the chill, breath visible in faint clouds. "Steady on, Holmes. We've a plan. Midday, full light from the clear story. No shadows for whatever this is." Gregson snorted, rubbing his ruddy cheeks raw. "Plan? Bollocks. That eye wasn't natural. I've seen enough in Whitechapel to know when the devil's at play. But fine, your game. I'll fetch more men from the yard, no telling Lestrade yet, or he'll steal the glory." Hawthorne hovered near the canopic jar, its alabaster surface veined like marble, lid propped ajar, revealing the desiccated heart within. "No more than a relic, gentlemen," he murmured, voice quavering. "Yet the texts warn of Amit, the devourer of hearts. It weighs souls against Mahat's feather. The unworthy vanish." Holmes ignored the curator's lore, mind dissecting the night's tally. 28 guards gone over months, now 3 more names etched from within bindings. The entity or man knew their count intimately. Adaptation. It fed on fear, on secrets. His own rose unbidden. The Afghan cabulary, Watson's bullet scar a reminder of debts unpaid. The morphine haze after Reichenbach, faked death leaving friends in mourning, the cocaine vials shattering illusions of control. Was this curse mirroring his fractures, forcing confession? They barricaded the doors with sarcophagi fragments and iron stanchions, the scrape of stone echoing like grinding teeth. Breakfast arrived via a trusted boy from the museum kitchens, stale bread, cheese, and weak tea that tasted of tin. Holmes forced it down, the simple sustenance grounding him against the void's pull. Watson watched, concern etching deeper lines around his eyes. "Talk to me, old chap. This isn't just the case. Your hand shakes worse than last night." "Not shakes," Holmes replied flatly. "Flexing bound fingers. Calculates. The jar's heart pulses only under moonlight, Hawthorne claims. Daylight should reveal mechanism, poison gas, hallucination powder from the sands." Gregson paced, flask emptied, sweat beading despite the damp cold. Hallucination felt real enough when it dragged young Peters. Screams cut short like into a pit. My lads swear they saw shadows with jackal heads. Silence fell, heavy as the fog outside. The hall breathed, alcoves whispering wind through cracks no wider than a blade. Holmes paced to the sealed alcove, pressing ear to wood. Faint scraping, like nails on bone. Inside, the 3 survivors huddled, unaware of the fresh etching. He signaled Watson. "Fetch them out after noon. Isolate variables." Hours dragged. Gas lamps dimmed to conserve fuel. Shadows lengthening paradoxically as clouds thickened overhead. Holmes retreated to a corner bench, violin case open beside him, bow idle. Stradivarius strings hummed faintly when plucked, a counterpoint to the rising dread. "Play," Watson urged. "Clears the mind." Instead, Holmes sketched diagrams, jar trajectories, guard positions, vapor dispersion patterns, but lines blurred, visions intruded. The syringe gleamed in memory, 7% solution promising deduction's edge, just once to pierce the veil. His arc of transformation faltered here, rationality crumbling against the abyss. What if the curse demanded truth, not science? Faith in unseen forces, grace beyond reason, a notion repugnant as prayer. Midday approached, clock tower tolling 11 from afar. Gregson returned with 4 burly constables, faces pale from street tales of hauntings. Museum closed, public barred, but whispers spread. The mummy's revenge, Pharaoh's wrath on imperial thieves. Hawthorne lit extra lamps, oil stench mingling with incense he'd burned for protection, myrrh and frankincense acrid and ancient. 12 struck noon sun-piercing clouds in a rare shaft. Bathing the jar in gold, they gathered, ropes loosened on Holmes alone now, trust fragile. "Ready?" he asked, voice steel. Hawthorne nodded, spectacles glinting. With reverence. Holmes pried the lid fully, hinges silent. The heart lay exposed, shriveled black, motionless in daylight. No pulse, no glow. Triumph flickered, mechanism debunked. See? Hypnosis, timed gas from hidden vents. But as he leaned closer, a sigh escaped the jar, not air but voices layered. Gregson, Hawthorne, Watson, Holmes. Each name twisted in agony, echoing the vanished. The heart quivered, cracking open to reveal not organ, but a mirror shard, reflecting Holmes' face warped, eyes jackal gold. He recoiled, shard slicing palm, blood welling hot. Pain sharpened focus, but the hall darkened abruptly, sun eclipsed by unnatural gloom. Lamps sputtered, dying one by one. Gregson bellowed for lights. Constables fumbled matches, shadows leaping like hounds. From the grand sarcophagus, lid groaned, shifting inches. Dust cascaded, and laughter bubbled. Not human, a wet rasp from throats long dry. The tempter's voice coalesced in Holmes's mind. Confess, detective. The guard's sins, adultery, theft, blasphemy. Yours? The lives bent to your genius, Watson's loyalty poisoned by your voids. Watson grabbed his arm. Sherlock, fight it! But Holmes staggered, blood dripping onto sand-strewn floor, symbols forming unbidden. 32. His name next? The ropes proved futile, invisible bonds tightened soul-deep. Gregson fired blindly into dark, bullet ricocheting off obelisk. A constable screamed, yanked backward into alcove gloom, vanishing mid-cry. Panic fractured them. Hawthorne collapsed, clutching chest, murmuring prayers in Coptic. Watson dragged Holmes toward exit, but doors rattled, sealed by force unseen. The devourer hungered not bodies but fractures, exposing Holmes's denial, the addict's throne crumbling. In the frenzy, Holmes glimpsed truth's seed. The jar planted weeks prior, but by whom? Hawthorne's tremor as he spoke of it. Gregson's averted eyes. Even Watson's war ghosts stirred. The entity preyed on collective guilt, amplifying until break. Another constable fell, whispers claiming him. 3 left, resolve splintering. Holmes injected will alone, no needle, violin seized for makeshift torch. Strum defiance, strings wailing lament. Light it, he roared. Flames caught cloth-wrapped relics, fire spreading erratic. Smoke billowed, choking, but shadows recoiled momentarily. They bolted for the alcove, smashing seal. Inside, survivors babbled of endless night, faces gaunt marked with ash hieroglyphs. Outside at last, gasping on Great Russell Street, fog parting for carriages. Relief soured, museum ablaze behind, sirens wailing. Gregson cursed promotion lost, but Holmes stared at bandaged palm, wound, throbbing like the heart. Daylight failed, the siege deepened at dusk. Watson steadied him. Rest now. We've time. No, Holmes whispered, eyes on museum inferno. It escaped with us. The mirror shard pulsed in his pocket, stolen in chaos. Nightfall loomed, promising personal unraveling, the devourer burrowing into his unspoken cravings, demanding surrender or redemption's price. If this story has gripped you, hit the like button. It helps reach more people who would love this. Fog clung to Great Russell Street like a shroud, the acrid bite of smoke from the museum inferno stinging their lungs as Holmes, Watson, Gregson, and Hawthorne stumbled into the gaslit haze. Carriages rattled past, oblivious to the 4 men who had just clawed their way out of hell's antechamber. Holmes clutched the pilfered mirror shard in his pocket, its edges biting into his palm through the fabric, a rhythmic throb sinking with his pulse. The wound from the obelisk had clotted, but something deeper festered, whispering of voids only his 7% solution could fill. Watson gripped Holmes's elbow, his limp more pronounced under the strain. Steady on, old chap. We've cheated it for now. A cab. Over there. Gregson barked orders at a cluster of wide-eyed constables emerging from the fog, their faces pale as they cordoned off the blaze. Hawthorne trailed behind, wheezing, his wire-rimmed spectacles fogged, white hair dishevelled like a ghost's ruff. The curator's eyes darted back to the flames, licking the museum's facade, as if mourning lost lovers. They piled into the hansom cab, the horse snorting at the scent of char. Gregson's lodgings first, he growled, wiping soot from his bushy side whiskers. No. Baker Street, Holmes interjected, voice a razor despite the pallor etching his gaunt features. My laboratory. Tests must be run. The shard demands analysis. Watson protested softly, but Holmes's piercing grey eyes silenced him. The detective's mind raced ahead, deductions forming like crystals in a supersaturated solution. The jar's placement premeditated, Hawthorne's tremor betraying prior knowledge, Gregson's fleeting glance at the canopic vessel suggesting complicity or coercion. Yet beneath logic lurked the entity's hunger, not for flesh, but for the fractures in their souls, Holmes's own denial of the abyss within. The cab lurched through Bloomsbury's labyrinth, gas lamps flickering like dying stars. Inside, silence pressed heavy, broken only by Hawthorne's ragged breaths. The old man clutched a small amulet unearthed from his jacket, fingers tracing faded hieroglyphs. Amit sees all, he murmured, voice frail as parchment. The devourer of hearts. We woke it with our greed. Holmes leaned forward, deerstalker askew. Superstition, Doctor. The vanishings follow a pattern. Electromagnetic anomalies from unearthed metals, hallucinogenic spores from the linen wrappings, mass hysteria amplified by your tales of curses. But Hawthorne shook his head, eyes gleaming behind lenses. You mock what you do not comprehend, Mr. Holmes. In the duat, judgment awaits the impure. The heart weighed against Mayat's feather. Ours are leaden. Baker Street greeted them with deceptive normalcy, Mrs. Hudson's windows glowing warmly against the chill. She ushered them in without question, her sturdy frame navigating the chaos with tea trays and bandages. Holmes beelined for his chemical bench, violin abandoned in the fray, pipe clenched unlit between teeth. He extracted the mirror shard carefully, its obsidian surface veined with gold, reflecting his haggard face in fractured multiplicity. Watson dressed Gregson's superficial cuts, while the inspector paced, ruddy cheeks flushed with fury. 28 men gone, Scotland Yard in uproar, and now the museum's a pyre. My career's ash, too. You'll solve this, Holmes, or we're all damned. Holmes ignored him, peering through his magnifying glass. The shard hummed faintly, or did his exhaustion conjure it? He applied reagents. Acid etched no impurities. Flame test yielded no spectral lines. Anomalous. Watson hovered, mustache twitching with concern. Your hand, it's swelling. Rest, Sherlock. The 7% beckons from the drawer, doesn't it? Holmes's aquiline nose flared, a flicker of craving crossing his sharp features. No, logic suffices. But as he probed the shard's edge, a vision assailed. Not memory, but imposition. Endless sands, a colossal beast with crocodile jaws, lion haunches, hippo bulk. Hearts piled before it, his own atop, blackened, shriveled by morphine dreams, neglected cases, Moriarty's shadow unresolved. He recoiled, knocking vials crashing. Gregson steadied him. Hallucinating already, Hawthorne rose unsteadily. It's begun. The mirror shows truth. Yours, Mr. Holmes, is isolation. You devour yourself, Holmes snarled, gaunt frame taut. Lies, fabrications of mold or gas. Yet doubt gnawed, his Inverness cape heavy as chains. Watson pulled him aside in the sitting room, fire crackling low. I've seen this before, in the camps, men cracking under unseen siege. Your mind's your fortress, don't let it breach. Holmes met his friend's kind blue eyes, war ghosts mirrored there. John, if reason fails. No, it won't. Dawn crept grey through curtains, but respite proved illusory. A frantic knock. Lestrade, Gregson's rival, dishevelled in the hall. More vanishings. Your flats, Gregson. 2 peelers gone from the cordon. Whispers of shadows spilling from the museum ruins. Gregson paled. It's spreading. Holmes pocketed the shard, resolve hardening despite the throb in his veins. To the site. Evidence awaits. They ventured out, fog thicker, laced with brimstone. The museum smouldered, firefighters dousing embers, but constables eyed alleys warily. At the perimeter, boot prints led nowhere, ending in swirling sand inexplicably strewn on pavement. Holmes knelt, curly hair damp, inhaling the grit. Egyptian desert soil, imported with relics. Pattern, radial dispersal, as if vacuumed inward. Gregson spat. Curse be damned, copycat! Hawthorne, pale as death, whispered, "No. Omit follows the impure. It tasted us last night. Your guilt, Inspector. Ambition over duty. Cases buried for promotion." Gregson's fist clenched. "Shut it, old man." Tension coiled as dusk loomed early under clouds. Holmes traced the sand with his bandaged palm, shard pulsing hotter. Herr Constable cried out nearby, yanked into fog by invisible force, his lantern clattering, beam catching. Nothing. Just absence. Watson drew his service revolver. "Sherlock!" Gregson bellowed for backup, but Holmes froze, vision returning. The beast, devouring not guards but their secrets. His own surfaced, cocaine haze blurring Irene Adler's ghost, Watson's loyalty strained by absences, the 7% throne mocking redemption. Snap. The shard cracked in his grip, blood welling anew. Pain lanced clear, banishing haze. Fire, torch it all. But too late. Whispers slithered from the ruins. Names. Sins. Hawthorne collapsed again, amulet glowing faintly. "Pray," he gasped. "Mahat demands balance." Holmes scoffed inwardly but knelt, fingers brushing sand. For the first time, logic yielded a sliver. What if faith was the missing variable? They retreated to a nearby tavern, the Queen's Arms, its ale-soaked air a frail bulwark. Gregson slammed mugs down. Plan, surround the site at midnight, rifles primed. Holmes stared into his untouched pint. Reflection warped. No. Divide and conquer fails against intangibles. We confront our wreckage first. Yours, Tobias. Falsified reports. John's, battlefield mercy kills. Elias, relics smuggled for glory. Mine. He trailed off, craving spiking like withdrawal. Watson leaned in. "We're with you." But as night deepened, a scream pierced from outside, another vanishing. The entity burrowed closer, personal now. Holmes fingered the cracked shard, its glow dimming. Midnight approached, promising not siege, but Soul's tribunal. In the mirror's remnants, his eyes reflected not defiance but dawning terror. The devourer wore his face. The tavern door rattled, wind or worse. They armed themselves, stepping into the devouring dark, unaware the true test lay not in the museum's ashes, but in the mirrors of their hearts, where Amit waited, scales tipping inexorably. The fog clung to their coats like a shroud as they pushed through the tavern door, the wooden frame groaning under an unseen pressure. Holmes led, his Inverness cape whipping in the sudden gust, the cracked shard clutched in his bloodied palm like a talisman he both despised and depended on. Its faint glow pulsed erratically, syncing with his heartbeat, a rhythm that mocked his rational mind. Watson followed close, revolver heavy in his grip, the metal cold against his sweat-slicked skin. Gregson muttered curses under his breath, lanterns swinging wildly, casting jagged shadows that danced like spectres across the cobblestones. Hawthorne trailed, his frail form hunched, amulet dangling from a chain around his neck, whispering prayers in a language older than the stones beneath their feet. The streets of Bloomsbury had emptied, gas lamps flickering as if strangled by the mist. Horse hooves echoed distantly, then silenced abruptly, swallowed whole. Holmes's mind raced, piecing fragments, the vanishings always at witching hour, always near reflective surfaces, polished marble floors, gilded frames, even the guards' belt buckles, mirrors. Portals to judgment, Hawthorne had raved earlier, his eyes wild behind wire-rimmed spectacles. Amit, the devourer of hearts, weighing souls against Ma'at's feather. Superstition, Holmes had dismissed, yet here he was, pulse thundering, the cocaine itch crawling under his skin like ants. They reached the museum's perimeter, the Egyptian hall looming through the haze, its grand facade cracked from the earlier blaze that had failed to purge the curse. Charred obelisks jutted like broken teeth, sand from shattered sarcophagi spilling onto the lawn, unnatural in London's chill autumn rain. The air smelled of scorched papyrus and something metallic. Blood? Fear? Holmes knelt by a fresh disturbance in the gravel, bootprints vanishing mid-stride. Another guard, he deduced instantly, the man's tobacco-stained cufflink glinting nearby. But deduction faltered. No body, no struggle marks, just absence. Gregson spat. "Bloody hell, Holmes. Your plan, confront our wreckage." We're walking into a slaughterhouse, rifles at dawn, that's sense. Holmes rose slowly, ignoring the burn in his bandaged hand. Sense yielded 28 souls, Tobias. Yours first, then. Those falsified reports, covering bribes from relic smugglers to pad your pension. Speak it. Gregson halted, lantern trembling, face ruddy in the flame's glow, side whiskers quivering. How? Fine. I turned blind eyes for coin. Empire's spoils, I thought, but it eats at me every night. A low rumble stirred the fog, like stones grinding in a tomb. Watson gripped Holmes's shoulder. John, your turn. Afghan Sands, those mercy shots to end suffering. Battlefield grace or murder? Watson's blue eyes clouded, limp more pronounced as he shifted. Bullets through mate's brows, screaming in agony. Easier than watching. God's mercy, I told myself. But their faces haunt the dreams. Hawthorne clutched his amulet, voice a rasp. My smuggled scarabs sold to private collectors for immortality's whisper. Glory over guardianship. Pharaoh's wrath follows. Holmes's throat tightened, the shard searing now, visions flickering. Irene's laugh dissolving into smoke, his 7% solution vials shattering on Baker Street floors. Watson's patient gaze fraying into resentment. Mine. The violations of justice for thrill. Bending laws, injecting voids. Irene lost to my detachment. Empty throne of intellect. The admission hung, raw and exposed, as thunder cracked overhead. No storm, just the hall's doors creaking open unbidden. Sand swirled inward, pulling at their boots like quicksand. They stumbled inside, the sanctuary turned mausoleum. Moonlight pierced stained glass, fracturing across toppled statues of Anubis, jackal heads leering. The air thickened, humid as Nile crypts, whispers multiplying, lies, debts, hearts heavy. Holmes staggered to the central plinth, where the prime sarcophagus lay rent open, its lid a shattered mosaic. He pressed the shard to the stone, expecting fracture. Instead, a mirror-like sheen bloomed beneath, reflecting not his face, but a hulking shadow. Crocodile jaws, lion haunches, hippopotamus fury. Amit. Heart scales tipping, feather blackening. But the eyes, his own, grey and piercing, hollowed by vice. No. Logic's roar tore from him. Hallucination from blood loss, narcotics residue. Yet the beast lunged in the reflection, jaws unhinging. Gregson screamed first, yanked backward by invisible talons, his lantern exploding in sparks. He vanished into a wall of fog, side whiskers the last glimpse. Watson fired blindly, bullets ricocheting off Anubis, the jackal statue seeming to grin wider. "Elias!" Holmes shouted, but Hawthorne was on his knees, amulet blazing white. Balance, Sherlock, grace the equation. Watson hauled Holmes back as sand engulfed Hawthorne's legs, the curator's frail hands clawing air. Forgive. The thefts. I repent. The glow intensified, sand receding slightly, but Hawthorne's body jerked, eyes rolling white. Gone. 2 left. Watson's revolver clicked empty. Holmes's mind fractured. Deduce. Calculate. Yet craving surged, promising numbness. The shard crumbled to dust in his fist, powder dusting his lips like fatal cocaine. Temptation incarnate. They backed toward the shadowed alcove, relics whispering sins anew, Watson's breath ragged. We're done, old chap. Run. Holmes's laugh, bitter, pipe forgotten in his pocket. Flight admits defeat. Face it. The fog coalesced, Amit's form solidifying halfway, scales glistening wetly, feathers drifting like accusations. It didn't pounce. Instead, it mirrored them. Watson's war ghosts marching in its maw, Holmes's vials multiplying. The devourer didn't kill, it reflected, forcing confrontation. Holmes lunged, grabbing a fallen torch from the earlier fire, flames sputtering blue from chemical residue. He thrust it at the beast, light-piercing fog. Back! But the reflection twisted, showing Watson hesitating in Afghanistan, mercy bullet hovering. Watson cried out, clutching his chest as if shot anew. "No more!" Holmes roared, torch arm trembling. The entity recoiled, but only inches, scales tipping further. Pain lanced Holmes's veins, withdrawal's vise, heart weighing heavier. Faith? The word intruded, Hawthorne's last gasp. Effort and grace. His knees buckled, torch dipping. Watson dragged him up. Together, Holmes, as brothers. But the alcove darkened, a new whisper slithering. Moriarty's shadow? No. Personal deeper. Holmes's eyes widened. The throne room empty, but now filled with lost cases, innocents sacrificed for puzzles. The beast advanced, jaws parting to reveal not teeth, but mirrors of every compromise. They fled deeper into the hall's labyrinthine annex, torch guttering, fog nipping heels. Doors slammed shut behind, trapping them in the relic vaults, gold scarabs, canopic jars staring blindly. Holmes slumped against a pedestal, chest heaving, the first crack in his fortress. What if reason was blind, faith the lens? Watson reloaded from scavenged pouches, voice steady despite terror. We'll signal dawn. Gregson must have... A guttural laugh echoed, not beastly, human. From the shadows, a figure emerged, gaunt, pipe aglow, deerstalker askew. Holmes himself? The doppelganger smirked, vial glinting in hand. Join the solution, it purred. Eternal clarity. Hallucination or horror? Holmes froze, the true tribunal unfolding not in scales, but self. Watson fired, shattering the apparition, but shards reformed, multiplying. The night deepened, annex sealing like a tomb, their wreckage converging to devour whole. Dawn seemed myth, as the mirrored Holmes extended the vial, whispering redemption's lie, one dose and oblivion. The mirrored Holmes stepped closer, its eyes gleaming with the same predatory intellect, the vial catching the dying torchlight like a serpent's fang. Holmes felt the pull, that familiar siren call of clarity, sharper than any deduction, promising to dissolve the chaos into crystalline order. His hand twitched, veins aching for the 7% solution, the beast's scales now balanced precariously on the edge of his crumbling resolve. Watson fired again, the shot echoing through the vault like thunder in a pharaoh's tomb. But the shards danced and reformed, multiplying into a chorus of Holmeses, each holding an identical vial, each whispering variations of the same temptation. One dose to silence the doubts, to reclaim the mind's supremacy over this infernal fog. The air thickened with the scent of myrrh and morphine, ancient resins mingling with chemical ghosts. Holmes backed against a canopic jar, its lid carved with the solemn face of Imseti, guardian of the liver. His own organ felt shredded from withdrawal's grip. The doppelgangers circled, their deerstalkers casting elongated shadows that writhed like Anubis jackals. "You're fracturing, old chap," one murmured, voice a perfect echo of his own clipped precision. "Reason demands efficiency. Faith is for the weak, the Hawthorne fools who cling to myths." Sweat beaded on Holmes's brow, dripping into his eyes, blurring the line between hallucination and horror. He saw flashes. The empty Egyptian hall at midnight, 28 guards vanished without trace, their posts pristine save for faint scorch marks on the stone. Had it been the curse, as Gregson first whispered in terror, or something more profane, his own experiments with the relic's powders, seeking stimulants from Tutankhamun's unguents? The museum's fog had rolled in unnatural that night, born of his vial's fumes perhaps, swallowing men whole. Watson grabbed his arm, voice raw with the grit of Afghan sands still haunting his dreams. "Steady on, Holmes. This isn't you. It's the poison talking. Remember the sanctuary, St. Mary's vestry, where Hawthorne prayed before he fell. Effort and grace," he said. "We fight it together." But the doppelgangers laughed, a symphony of skepticism, advancing with vials raised like chalices of oblivion. Holmes's mind raced, deductions snapping like brittle reeds, the guards' disappearances patterned like his injection cycles, every 7 hours, fog peaks aligning with his highs. Had he conjured this entity from the ether, a manifestation of his moral ledger tipping toward damnation, a real memory pierced? Dr. Elias Hawthorne, frail in his velvet jacket, spectacles fogged as he clutched the ankh amulet in the curator's alcove. The relics whisper, "Holmes, not curses, but truths. You've disturbed the balance. Your intellect devours the soul." Hawthorne's eyes had held no judgment, only pity, as if seeing the beast coiled within from the start. The vault doors groaned, sealed by unseen forces, gold scarabs glinting mockingly from shelves. Holmes dropped the torch, flames hissing out in a puddle of wax and regret. Darkness swallowed them, save for the vial's bioluminescent glow. His knees hit the cold marble, the beast's weight crushing now, scales plummeting as compromises replayed. The Reichenbach mercy that wasn't, innocence collateral in Moriarty's web. Watson's loyalty strained to breaking. "Father, forgive." Hawthorne's voice echoed unbidden, a prayer not his own. Holmes recoiled. Faith? Absurdity. Yet the word lodged, a foreign body demanding extraction. Watson knelt beside him, revolver spent, hand steady on his shoulder despite the limp pulling at his old wound. "I've seen hell in the passes, Holmes. Bullets and blood, mates dying for Empire's lie. But you pulled me from that abyss with logic. Now let me pull you with something more. Gregson's out there, combing the Thames fog, but he won't find us without light inside." One doppelganger lunged, vial to Holmes's lips, the taste of cocaine bitter-sweet on his tongue before he spat it away. No. The apparition shattered, but others swarmed, pinning him in a vortex of self-reproach. The wreckage of his life piled high. Mary Morstan's ghost, Watson's unspoken resentments, the Empire's spoils mocking his detachment. Then a fracture, a sliver of dawn. No, a true sound. Pounding at the vault doors, Gregson's bellow muffled through stone. "Holmes! Watson! Scotland Yard's here. Open up!" The doppelgangers faltered, hissing as light from a real lantern seeped through cracks. Gregson, ruddy face pressed to the seam, bushy whiskers quivering. "Blast it, man! We've traced the fog to these vaults. Chemical traces you're doing?" Holmes staggered up, Watson hauling him, the beast recoiling into shadows. "Not entirely, Inspector." The tempter's voice faded, but the scales lingered in his mind, unbalanced still. They wrenched the doors open, spilling into the annex corridor where gas lamps flickered back to life. Gregson gripped Holmes's arm, eyes wide not with rivalry, but raw concern. "The lads from the hall, scorch marks match your lab burners. Curse or concoction?" Holmes straightened his deerstalker, pipe clenched unlit between teeth. Concoction, amplified by relic volatiles. But the vanishings. Mirrors within mirrors. The guards inhaled the fog, trapped in hallucinatory tombs of their fears. Watson nodded, blue eyes steady. "Like us tonight." Gregson grunted, leading them toward the Egyptian hall's grand nave, obelisks looming like sentinels. "We've dredged nothing from the river. If it's your mess, Holmes, own it before the press bays for blood." The hall opened before them. Sarcophagi silent witnesses, fog dissipated to wisps. Holmes paused at the threshold, inner scales shifting, a gram of grace weighing against the ounce of effort. Hawthorne's ankh glinted on the floor, picked up by Watson, who pressed it into his palm. "Keep it." Reminder. But as they stepped into the light, a shadow detached from a towering statue of Sekhmet, not doppelganger, but flesh. A gaunt figure in curator's robes, not Hawthorne, but his assistant, eyes feverish, holding a fresh vial. "Join us, Holmes. The true solution. Eternal balance in the beyond." Holmes froze, deduction igniting. The vanishings not accident, but invitation. The man smirked, fog coiling anew from hidden braziers. Gregson drew his Webley, but the figure melted into mist, laughter echoing. "Who was that?" Watson demanded, heart pounding. "The tempter incarnate," Holmes whispered, ankh burning in his fist, "and he's just begun." They raced after, the hall awakening to new horrors, Holmes's resolve cracking open to possibilities beyond reason, faith's fragile light piercing the void. Yet the vial's whisper persisted, promising escape, as footsteps thundered toward the relic depths once more. In this labyrinth of stone and soul, who pulled the strings? Comment who you suspect. Can you solve it first? Dawn crept over the Thames, but the night's tribunal raged on, Holmes teetering on breakthrough's brink, the beast's jaws widening for the final bite. The fog thickened like a living shroud as Holmes plunged deeper into the Egyptian hall's labyrinthine undercroft. The ankh clutched so tightly in his fist that its edges bit into his palm. Each step echoed off walls etched with hieroglyphs that seemed to writhe in the gaslight's flicker, Anubis judging souls, serpents uncoiling from eternity. His mind raced ahead, piecing the fragments. The assistant, young Mr. Percival Thorne, Hawthorne's shadow, eyes alight with fanatic gleam. Not mere accomplice, but architect. The vials, the braziers, hallucinogenic mists laced with relic dust, trapping minds in pharaonic purgatory. Yet beneath the chemistry pulsed something older, a whisper of surrender Holmes had long dismissed as folly. Watson huffed behind him, revolver steady in his grip, the limp from his Afghan scar pulling at his stride. Steady on, Holmes. That devil vanished like smoke. Could be anywhere in this maze. Gregson barreled past, bull-like shoulders scraping a sarcophagus lid, his Webley barking into shadows. "Show yourself, you cursed wretch! Scotland Yard's closing in." Holmes raised a hand, silencing them. Listen, no footsteps ahead. The laughter. It's looped from hidden phonograph horns. A decoy. Thorne toys with us, drawing us to the heart. The air grew heavier, scented with myrrh and decay, as they rounded into the hall's forbidden vault, a chamber ringed by canopic jars, their lids carved as jackal heads staring blindly. Central stood a massive obsidian altar, etched with spells for the weighing of hearts, and there, perched atop it like a false god, was Thorne. Gaunt, mid-30s, with sallow skin stretched over high cheekbones, unkempt black hair framing eyes that burned with unnatural fervor. His curator's robes hung loose, stained with chemical residue, a fresh vial glinting in his hand. "Ah, the great detective graces us," Thorne said, voice smooth as Nile silt laced with a mocking Oxford lilt. "Come for enlightenment, Mr. Holmes, or to shatter what you've built?" Holmes halted, pipe forgotten in his pocket, the deer's talker shadowing his sharp features. "You've orchestrated the vanishings, Thorne. Fog from Egyptian resins, acacia, lotus, opium derivatives, inhaled. It induces catatonia, visions of the duat. The guards didn't vanish. You sequestered them in hidden cells, feeding their delirium until they believed themselves mummified souls." Hawthorne suspected, "So you silenced him first." Thorne laughed, low and resonant, hopping down with feline grace. Silenced, elevated. The professor saw the truth too late. The relics demand balance. 28 souls for the car of Pharaoh Amenhotep's curse, unearthed carelessly by imperial greed. I merely facilitate the exchange. Breathe deep, Holmes. Join the eternal. Watson leveled his revolver. "You're mad, man. Surrender or you'll what? Arrest shadows?" Thorne smashed the vial at their feet, mist erupting in a choking plume. Holmes staggered, the world tilting as visions clawed inward, not his own memories, but amplified fears. He saw himself, gaunt and hollow-eyed in Baker Street, violins silent, cocaine needle-piercing vein after case after failure. Moriarty's shadow lengthening, Mary Watson's grave fresh dug in his neglect. Grace? A lie for the weak. Reason alone crumbles. Only oblivion redeems. He gasped, shaking it off, the ankh's cool metal grounding him. No. Your chemistry preys on guilt, Thorne. But guilt can forge change. You've no God here, only desperation. Gregson coughed through the haze, firing blindly, bullet ricocheting off stone. The inspector's ruddy face paled, whispers of his own regrets surfacing. Botched cases, a wife's slow death from drink he ignored. Watson clutched his side, old bullet wound throbbing, visions of Helmand passes where comrades fell unwatched. Thorne circled them, shadow puppet in the lamplight. Desperation? Enlightenment. Hawthorne resisted, chained himself to preach reason over revelation. Now he wanders the duat, begging Osiris for release. You, Holmes, your mind's a tomb already. Empty victories, friends borrowed like tools. Breathe the mist, let it weigh your heart. Holmes lunged, tackling Thorne to the altar's edge. They grappled, the detective's long fingers clamping Thorne's wrist, shattering another vial. Glass shards glittered like stars as they rolled, Holmes's Inverness cape tangling. Thorne's knee drove into his ribs, breath hot against his ear. You've bent laws for justice before, forged evidence, coerced confessions. Why fight the inevitable? The beyond offers absolution without effort. The word struck deeper than the blow. Holmes faltered, images flashing. The Baskerville Moor. Lies to protect Watson. The speckled band. Mercy-killing veiled as accident. Was he redeemer or destroyer? Faith's fragile light, Hawthorne's ankh seemed to pulse. Grace not earned, but seized amid wreckage. Watson hauled Gregson upright, the pair advancing. "Enough," the doctor growled, slamming Thorne's arm against stone. The tempter howled, vile shards drawing blood, mist thinning. Gregson cuffed him roughly, side whiskers quivering with triumph and tremor. "Got you, you snake. Where are the men? Spill it." Thorne slumped, eyes defiant yet dimming. False walls. Behind Sekhmet's paws. They'll wake changed, touched by eternity. "As will you, Holmes." The pull returns. Holmes rose, dusting his cape, chest heaving. Not eternity. Restoration. He nodded to Watson, who pried open a concealed panel behind the lioness statue. Moans echoed from within. A hidden crypt, 28 forms curled fetal on straw pallets, faces gaunt, eyes fluttering open to gaslight reality. One guard stirred, whispering thanks to saints unseen. Holmes knelt beside him, ankh extended. "You've returned. Hold to this, reminder that souls endure beyond schemes." As medics swarmed at Gregson's bellow, Thorne dragged away snarling prophecies. Holmes felt the scales tip. Inner scales, not Pharaoh's but his own. Years of detachment cracked, admitting the void reason alone couldn't fill. Watson clasped his shoulder, blue eyes knowing. "You've done it, old friend. But at what cost to yourself?" Holmes pocketed the ankh, its weight lighter now. "The cost of sight. Watson. We've saved bodies. Now mend spirits." Dawn's light pierced the hall's high clerestory, gilding obelisks in gold. Press waited outside, headlines brewing, curse crushed by consulting genius. Yet Holmes lingered, staring at a fractured scarab underfoot. Thorne's mist had unearthed truths no deduction grasped. Redemption's alchemy blended grace and grit, community the crucible. Gregson clapped his back gruffly. "Owe you one, Holmes, case closed, promotion mine, but that fog felt like the devil's own breath." "Perhaps it was," Holmes murmured, mind turning outward. Hawthorne, where truly was he? The curator's absence gnawed, no body found, and Thorne's final glare promised unfinished rites. Watson scanned the vault. "We should search the upper galleries. Something's amiss." As they ascended crumbling stairs, footsteps muffled by dust, a faint chant drifted from the shadows. Ancient words, or Thorne's echo. Holmes's pulse quickened, the ankh warming again. Restoration begun, but the true test loomed. Confront the wreckage of his soul before another vanished into the beyond. Outside, London's fog lifted, revealing spires sharp against sky. But within the museum's bowels, darkness coiled tighter, Hawthorne's ghost or Thorne's kin awaiting the detective's faltering faith. What relic hid the final key? Holmes's boots echoed softly on the worn stone stairs, each step stirring motes of dust that danced like spectral fireflies in the beam of Watson's lantern. The air grew thicker, laced with the metallic tang of old iron and something sweeter, almost cloying like incense burned too long in a pharaoh's tomb. Watson followed close, his limp more pronounced in the uneven ascent, breath steady but eyes scanning the gloom above. "That chant," Holmes murmured, pausing to press a hand against the cool wall. "It's no echo, listen." They froze. The sound swelled faintly, a low rhythmic cadence in a tongue older than stone, weaving through the shadows like smoke. Not Thorne's voice, higher, more frail, laced with desperation. Hawthorne? The upper galleries unfolded before them, a labyrinth of forgotten crates and shrouded relics piled high under cobwebbed arches. Gas jets flickered sporadically, casting elongated shadows that twisted like serpents across faded murals of Nile gods. Holmes moved forward, revolver drawn but low, the ankh now tucked into his waistcoat pocket, its etched lines pressing against his chest like a talisman he no longer mocked. There, a sliver of light seeped from beneath a heavy oak door at the corridor's end, its brass handle tarnished to near black. The chant sharpened, words resolving into broken English overlaid on ancient Coptic. "Come. Balance. The scales demand their due. Watson gripped Holmes's arm. It's him, but changed. That voice. Holmes nodded, pulse thrumming with a mix of deduction's thrill and something deeper, unnameable, a tremor in his ironclad logic. He eased the door open, hinges sighing like a dying breath. Dr. Elias Hawthorne knelt in the chamber's center. Frail form hunched over a makeshift altar of ebony wood, scavenged from shattered cases. Candles guttered around him, their flames bowing to drafts from unseen vents, illuminating walls lined with papyrus scrolls and jars of viscous oils. The curator's white hair hung lank, spectacles askew on his beakish nose, velvet jacket torn at the sleeves. Before him lay the fractured scarab from the hall below, pieced together with trembling fingers. Beside a golden chalice brimming with dark liquid that smelled of myrrh and blood. Animal, perhaps, but the scent clung wrong. Hawthorne's eyes, milky with exhaustion, lifted slowly. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, you've come for the weighing." Holmes stepped inside, revolver vanishing into his coat as he assessed. No weapons visible, only relics arrayed like a madman's sacrament. The room pulsed with heat from the candles, sweat beading on Hawthorne's brow despite the chill. "Doctor, what madness grips you? Thorne's fog, did it claim you too?" A ragged laugh escaped the old man, dissolving into coughs that racked his thin frame. Madness? No, clarity. The duat opened, Holmes. 28 souls brushed the edge pulled back by your pract's intervention. But I saw. The ankh you wielded. It called me here. The curse isn't Thorne's folly alone. It's mine. Watson knelt beside him, medical instincts overriding caution, pressing fingers to the curator's wrist. Pulse erratic, fever high. Elias, rest. Whatever visions, visions. Hawthorne seized Watson's sleeve, knuckles white. Truths. For decades I guarded these shadows, whispering to them in the night. Obsessed, yes. Art turned to appetite. I sought the right to preserve, to eternalize the empire's spoils. Thorne was my pupil, eager for power I dangled. We summoned the mist together to bind the guards as sentinels eternal. But the scales tipped, greed over guardianship. Holmes circled the altar, eyes tracing symbols etched fresh into the wood. Ankh intertwined with scales, a heart offered to jackal-headed judgment. Your confession spares no one, Doctor. Gregson will hear it. But why now? Why summon us? Hawthorne's gaze drifted to the scarab, its wings now whole, gleaming unnaturally, the final piece. Thorne escaped to finish what we began. He believes the guard's return unbalanced the duat. Revenge calls for 29. You, Holmes, your mind, sharp as Anubis's blade, weighs heavy on the other side. The fog returns at midnight, fuller, to claim what reason denies, the soul's frailty. A chill wind snuffed half the candles, plunging corners into black. Watson helped Hawthorne to his feet, the old man leaning heavy, breath rasping. I tried to stop him, sealed myself here with counter-rites, failed. Grace. It demands witness. Holmes felt the ankh warm again, hotter now, sinking with his heartbeat. Grace. The word hung, foreign yet fitting, chipping at his detachment. Years of cases solved by synapse and science, yet here stood wreckage, a man's obsession mirroring his own relentless pursuit, both courting voids. Thorne's kin. No, Thorne himself puppeteered by shared sin. We end this tonight, Holmes said firmly, voice steadying the room's tremor. Watson, fetch Gregson. Secure the hall below. Doctor, you rest. Tell me the counter-right. As Watson hurried out, lantern-swinging shadows wild, Hawthorne sank onto a crate, gesturing weakly to a scroll. Papyrus crackled under Holmes's fingers, ink faded but potent. Invocations for balance, offering not blood but amends, truth spoken, harm renounced, simple, profound, effort and surrender. Midnight neared. Outside, Big Ben's chimes tolled 11, muffled by stone. Holmes paced, mind racing through variables. Thorne's escape route via service tunnels. Fogg's chemical base laced with hallucinogens from Hawthorne's stores, psychological hold on the guards. Yet the ankh mocked pure empiricism. Its warmth defied analysis. Hawthorne watched him, eyes clearing slightly. You doubt still, detective, but you held it in the vault, felt the pull. Reason built empires, but spirits topple them. Thorne preys on that fracture in you. The cases where law bent, lives traded for greater goods. Holmes halted, pipe forgotten in his pocket. Memories surged. Moriarty's web, choices grey as fog, Watson's unwavering light amid moral murk. You've pierced me, Doctor, not with curses, but candour. Footsteps thundered below, Gregson arriving, medics in tow. Watson burst in first, face flushed, secured the guards, their stable murmuring prayers. Thorne sighted near the Thames docks, slipped our net, but not for long. Gregson lumbered in behind, whiskers bristling. What's this? Curator alive? Spill it, Hawthorne. The old man straightened, voice gaining strength. My confession, Inspector. Accomplice to attempted murder by mystic means. Arrest me. Gregson blinked, then nodded gruffly. Right. But first, Thorne. Holmes your lead? Holmes pocketed the scroll, ankh secure. Docks at midnight. He seeks culmination there, water as Duat's mirror. We confront not just him, but the right's heart. As they descended, Hawthorne supported between Watson and medics. The museum exhaled, a vast stone lung releasing held breath. Dawn's earlier gold had yielded to twilight's bruise, gas lamps blooming along Great Russell Street like wary eyes. Cabs clattered past, oblivious to the shadows trailing toward the river. Holmes walked ahead, Inverness cape swirling, inner scales shifting. Deduction had unveiled the plot. Now faith, in allies, in redemption's grit, must seal it. Thorne waited, fog brewing perhaps from sewer mists, chalice in hand for the 29th soul. But as they neared the embankment, a newsboy's cry pierced the dusk. Extra! Museum curse lifted, guards awake. Yet Holmes sensed the lie in normalcy. Thorne's glare from the vault echoed, unfinished rites. Watson's hand found his shoulder again. Whatever comes, Holmes, we face it together, not alone in the dark. Holmes nodded, grey eyes stealing. Together. The ankh burned steady now, a bridge from void to light. Yet at the Thames's edge, where barges groaned against pilings and fog, truly rolled in from the water, thick, purposeful, a figure emerged from alley murk. Not Thorne alone. A woman, veiled, chalice gleaming in her grasp. Thorne's sister, kin unseen. She smiled thinly. The detective arrives. The Duat hungers still, for intellect unbent. Holmes froze, revolver rising slow. The true test ignited, scales quivering on the precipice. Fog clung to the Thames like a shroud woven from the river's own size, thick and unyielding, carrying the brine of distant seas and the rot of forgotten cargoes. Barges creaked against weathered pilings, their hulls scarred by years of relentless tides, while gas lamps along the embankment flickered uncertainly, casting pools of amber that barely pierced the mist. Sherlock Holmes stood at the water's edge, his revolver steadying in his grip, the cold metal a stark anchor against the surreal chill seeping into his bones. The veiled woman before him held the chalice aloft, its golden rim catching a stray gleam from the lamps, as if the artifact itself hungered for the light it had stolen from so many souls. She lowered the veil with deliberate grace, revealing a face etched by shadows, high cheekbones, eyes dark as the Duat's depths, lips curved in a knowing smile that spoke of secrets older than the stones beneath their feet. Not Thorne's sister, Holmes realized in a flash of deduction, but Amelia Voss, the archaeologist's widow, long rumored to have vanished into Egypt's sands after her husband's fatal expedition. Her presence here twisted the plot like a serpent uncoiling. The scrolls had hinted at a female hand in the rites, but he dismissed it as misdirection. The detective arrives, she murmured again, her voice a silken thread laced with ancient cadence, vowels elongated like chants from temple walls. The Duat hungers still, for intellect unbent, for the rational mind that denies the gods' reach. Holmes's grey eyes narrowed, pipe forgotten in his pocket, the ankh's weight pressing against his chest like a talisman. He no longer mocked. You've orchestrated this symphony of shadows, Mrs. Voss. The guards, Hawthorne's complicity, Thorne as your blade in the dark. But why? The museum's relics are curiosities, not portals. She laughed softly, a sound like wind through papyrus reeds, stepping closer until the chalice's fumes, acrid myrrh and something sharper like blood iron wafted toward him. Portals? They are keys, Mr. Holmes. My husband unearthed Anubis's scales from a pharaoh's hidden tomb, scales that weigh not gold, but hearts. The British Empire plunders our gods, scatters them in glass cases for gawking fools. I reclaim them. 28 souls offered, guards who stood sentinel over sacrilege. Thorne believed the curse divine. I made it so. Behind Holmes, Watson emerged from the fog, revolver drawn, his limp more pronounced on the slick cobbles. Gregson followed, Scotland Yard men fanning out like wary hounds, their boots thudding dully. Holmes, don't engage, it's a trap. But Holmes held his ground, mind racing through the threads. The vapor's composition, now confirmed as a hypnotic distillate mimicking death. Hawthorne's guilt born of coerced visions. Thorne's fanaticism fueled by Voss's whispers. Yet beneath the mechanics stirred something deeper, a fracture in his own fortress of reason. The ankh had warmed against his skin in the vault, as if alive, and the guard's awakening, not spontaneous, but tied to his interruption, suggested a power logic alone couldn't bind. Thorne slunk from the alley then, dishevelled, eyes wild with fervour, clutching a curved dagger etched with jackal heads. "Sister of the right," he rasped, voice gravel from dockside gin. The detective profanes the offering. "Let me end him, scale his heart." Voss raised a hand, silencing him. "No, Elias. Patience. Holmes, join us. Your mind could balance the scales eternally. Deny the divine no longer. Feel the void's pull." The name struck Holmes. Elias Thorne, not mere thug, but her acolyte, bound by loss. His own losses flickered unbidden. The hollow years without purpose between cases, the cocaine haze that dulled the tedium, Watson's steadfast gaze a mirror to his isolation. Rock bottom had come not in opium dens, but in the sterility of pure intellect, where emotion was weakness, faith superstition. Watson stepped forward, voice steady despite the tremor in his hand. "Madam, this ends now. The guards live. Your curse broken. Surrender, or we'll—" A low chant began from the fog-shrouded barges, shadows detaching, 3 figures in hooded robes, acolytes murmuring invocations, their voices syncing with the river's lap. The water churned unnaturally, eddies forming spirals that mimicked the ankh's loops. Gregson bellowed orders, his men advancing, but one acolyte hurled a vial. Glass shattered, releasing vapor that dropped 2 constables gasping to their knees. Holmes fired, a warning shot cracking the night, splintering a piling. Voss recoiled, chalice spilling dark liquid into the Thames, where it hissed like acid. Thorne lunged, dagger flashing, but Watson intercepted, tackling him into the muck. They grappled, Thorne's snarls mixing with Watson's grunts, the doctor's army-honed strength prevailing as he pinned the man's wrist. Elias Voss backed toward a waiting skiff, moored in the gloom, robes trailing like spectres. "You think reason triumphs? The duet claims all in time, even you, Holmes, your soul teeters." Holmes advanced, revolver trained, but hesitation gripped him. The ankh burned hotter, visions assaulting, scales tipping, not with feathers, but faces, guards, Watson. His own reflection warped by doubt. "Faith," Hawthorne had whispered in the museum, trembling after confession. Not blind belief, but grace amid the wreckage. The curator's arc mirrored his own. Scholar turned pawn, now seeking absolution through truth. Gregson cuffed Thorne, wrenching him upright, the man's defiance crumbling into sobs. It was her, the goddess's voice. "I saw the afterlife, Inspector, empty without sacrifice." "Empty," Holmes echoed inwardly. His life, a vault of deductions, echoing void. As Voss leaped aboard the skiff, pole pushing it into the current, he holstered his weapon. Not today, pursuit later. First, the wounded. Medics swarmed from carriages clattering down the embankment, lanterns bobbing like will-o'-the-wisps. Watson rose, bruised but unbowed, clapping Holmes's shoulder. "Close one, old chap, but she's fleeing, with the chalice." Holmes nodded, gaze fixed on the vanishing silhouette amid fog banks. "The right's heart pulses still. We track her to source, at the museum's hidden chamber where the scales originated." As Thorne was dragged away, muttering fractured prayers, A church bell tolled from St. Clement Danes, its peals cutting the mist like a summons. Watson glanced skyward, where stars pierced sporadically. Divine intervention. Or coincidence? Holmes felt the ankh cool, a quiet affirmation, perhaps both. For the first time, reason bent, not broke, yielding space for the unseen. They piled into hansom cabs, horses snorting steam into the night, racing back toward Bloomsbury. The city unfolded in gaslit vignettes, flower girls hawking wilted blooms, newsboys hoarse from curse headlines now outdated. Inside Holmes, turmoil churned. Voss's words gnawed, intellect unbent. Had his arrogance blinded him to human frailty, to the grace that redeems it? At the British Museum, Hawthorne waited in the Egyptian hall, frail form silhouetted against sarcophagi that loomed like silent judges. The guards, all 28, milled groggily in the courtyard, medics tending their haze-induced stupor. "Recovery's dawn," the curator said weakly, clasping a Bible now visible on his lectern. "But the scales, they call from below." Holmes descended the service stairs anew, Watson and Gregson close, torches guttering in drafts from subterranean vaults. Dust motes danced like lost souls, air heavy with tomb earth and incense residue. At the chamber's heart, a pedestal bore indentations, ankh-shaped scale pan voids. Voss's origin point. Footsteps echoed above. Acolytes, or allies from the church community Hawthorne had quietly rallied, faith-fueled volunteers who'd prayed through the night. A shadow fell across the threshold. Voss, chalice refilled, robes torn, but eyes ablaze. The final weighing begins. Holmes, step onto the scales. He did, heart pounding, revolver drawn, but soul exposed. The ankh resonated, light blooming from its facets, not curse but counter, grace illuminating truth. As Voss chanted, the chamber trembled, visions assaulting, his moral compromises, Watson's buried traumas, Gregson's ambitions cost. But amid despair, faces emerged, forgiving guards, Hawthorne's contrite gaze, Thorne's plea for mercy in custody. Reason and faith entwined, the scales balanced. Voss staggered, chalice shattering, her form crumpling as vapor backlashed, binding her in hypnotic thrall. Holmes knelt beside her, pulse faint but present. Not the duat, Mrs. Voss, redemption's court. Watson helped him up, brotherhood solid. The rite ends. But as constables hauled her away, a whisper lingered, one scale featherlight, the other heavy with unresolved sin. Thorne's trial loomed, family shattered yet reaching for forgiveness. Holmes's journey far from over, the inner void demanded its own restoration. Dawn crept through grates, gilding relics with hope's tentative brush. Yet in the Thames fog's memory, another shadow stirred. Voss's final acolyte, chalice shard clutched, plotting renewal. Dawn's frail light filtered through the iron grates of the British Museum's subterranean vaults, painting the ancient stone in hesitant gold. Sherlock Holmes stood motionless amid the scattered shards of Voss's chalice, their crystalline edges catching the glow like fractured promises. His Inverness cape hung heavy with damp, the revolver still warm in his pocket, a reminder of choices that blurred the line between justice and vengeance. Watson lingered nearby, his limp more pronounced in the chill, blue eyes scanning the shadows for threats unseen. Inspector Gregson barked orders to the constables, hauling Mrs. Voss away, her frail form limp in their grasp, whispers of redemption echoing faintly in Holmes's mind. But that whisper from the fog, the one that lingered like Thames mist, drew Holmes's gaze upward. A scuffle of boots on the service stairs, too deliberate for a constable's tread. He signaled Watson silently, the two slipping into the alcove where obelisks loomed like silent judges. The air thickened with the scent of wet earth and lingering incense, each breath a reminder of the night's illusions. Guards returned from hypnotic haze, their eyes clearing as if from a fever dream. Hawthorne had called it grace, clutching his Bible amid the recovery. Holmes had scoffed inwardly then, but now, with his pulse still ragged, doubt gnawed deeper. A figure emerged at the threshold, slender, cloaked in a threadbare greatcoat, clutching something glinting in the half-light. Not Voss's bulk, but lithe. Desperate. Elias Hawthorne's son, young Marcus, no more than 20, face gaunt with the same fanatic hollows that had marked his father. Holmes had glimpsed him once before, in the trial preparations, eyes burning with inherited zeal. Marcus's hand trembled around a shard of the chalice, its ankh etching smeared with residue that shimmered unnaturally. He scanned the chamber, voice a ragged whisper. Father's work unfinished. The scales demand balance. Holmes stepped forward, pipe unlit between his teeth, voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. Marcus Thorne, your father's path led to chains. Step back before yours does the same. The young man whirled, shard raised like a talisman, eyes wild under a mop of unkempt hair. You mock what you can't comprehend, detective. The duat calls the unworthy. 28 souls weighed and found wanting. Mother warned us, Voss showed the way. His free hand clutched a crumpled letter, ink smudged. Pleas from a sister, begging him to abandon the cult's remnants. Watson edged closer, hand on his service revolver, but Holmes waved him off. This wasn't for lead or law. It was the inner scales tipping. His own moral ledger flashing in memory. Cases bent for expediency, Watson's loyalty strained by secrets unspoken. Marcus's desperation mirrored his own hidden fractures. The void reason alone couldn't fill. The shard pulsed faintly as Marcus advanced, chanting fragments of Voss's rite, air humming with induced vertigo. Holmes felt it pull, visions flickering, his Afghan shadows, Watson's buried screams from my wand, Gregson's ambition curdling into regret. But he rooted himself, recalling Hawthorne's frail hand on his shoulder hours before, in the sanctuary of St. Giles' Church nearby, where gas lamps flickered over pews worn smooth by generations of the lost. Elias had led him there after Voss's fall, the elderly curator's wire-rimmed spectacles glinting in candlelight, white hair like a halo in the gloom. No curses, Holmes, only men wielding fear as power. Faith isn't blind, it's the light when deduction falters. The church community, those quiet souls who'd prayed through the fog-shrouded nights, had gathered then. Weathered faces from Whitechapel's alleys offering bread and silent testimony. One, a former opium den habitué named Clara, had gripped Holmes's arm. I was Thorne's first mark, lost nights to his whispers. Grace pulled me back, not magic, effort and hands held in prayer. Now in the vaults, Holmes echoed that grace, voice low, intimate. Marcus, your sister waits at home, in the cramped flat off Baker Street. No, not yours, but the Reconciliation Brewing. Thorne Sr. faces trial tomorrow at Old Bailey, but she wrote to you. Read it. Not for me, for the boy who once played by the Serpentine before Voss poisoned your blood. Marcus faltered, shard dipping, letter unfolding in his grip. Tears carved tracks through grime. She forgives, Father? After the guards, the haze that stole months from our lives. Holmes nodded, stepping nearer, the ankh's glow dimming as will asserted over trance. Forgiveness isn't absolution, it's the start. Your father's wreckage, debts to those families, jobs lost in hypnotic thrall. But Hawthorne rallies aid, church funds for restitution, jobs in the museum's restoration wing. You've a choice, shard or sister. Gregson burst from the stairs then, ruddy face flushed, but Holmes held up a hand. The inspector paused, side whiskers bristling, ambition yielding to the scene's gravity. Thorne's whelp, stand down. Marcus crumpled, shard clattering to stone, sobs racking his frame. Watson knelt, sturdy arm around the youth, murmuring of wars survived, brothers found. Holmes watched, chest loosening, the detective's detachment cracking further. His arc bent here, not triumph, but tentative mending. A reason entwining with the faith he'd long dismissed. They emerged into the Egyptian hall proper, relics bathed in morning haze, gas jets hissing softly. Dr. Hawthorne waited by the pedestal, frail in his velvet jacket, Bible tucked away. Constables led Marcus up, not to cells but to St. Giles for the night, community watch, not irons. Thorne's trial loomed, but whispers of plea bargains, men scripted with church mediation. Holmes lit his pipe at last, tobacco's earthy bite grounding him. Watson clapped his shoulder, mustache twitching in a half-smile. "You've bent again, old man. Not the law, but yourself." "Perhaps," Holmes replied, exhaling smoke that curled like forgiving fog. "The scales Voss invoked, they're internal. Voss rots in Newgate, her hypnosis broken by counter-rite and confession. But Thorne's family fractures heal slowly, Marcus's choice the first stitch." Gregson grunted approval, ambition tempered. Promotion be damned, this closes clean with hope. As they stepped into the courtyard, horse-drawn hansom clattering by, Holmes's gaze caught a flicker in the fog rolling from the Thames. Not shadow, but silhouette. A woman, veiled, watching from the gates. Thorne's wife, or Voss's unspoken sister. Chalice law passed deeper. She turned, vanishing into mist, a final test unspoken. That night in his Baker Street rooms, Holmes paced before the fire, violin untouched. Watson dozed in his chair, bandaged leg propped. The inner journey pressed, compromises catalogued, Grace's feather weighing against reason's lead. Thorne's amends tomorrow demanded his testimony, not detached but human. Yet the veil's gaze lingered, pulling toward temptation's echo. Morning brought Old Bailey's shadow, family eyes pleading across the dock. Holmes straightened his deerstalker, pipe clenched. Restoration beckoned, but shadows stirred anew. The morning fog clung to Old Bailey like a shroud, thick and unyielding, muffling the clatter of carriage wheels on the stones. Sherlock Holmes stepped from the hansom, his Inverness cape heavy with damp, deerstalker pulled low against the chill. His pipe remained unlit, clenched between teeth that ground against the weight of what lay ahead. Thorne's trial, not for the vanishings, those pinned on Voss's hypnotic webs and Hawthorne's unwitting complicity, but for the forgery ring that had fed the relic's black market hunger. Amends, they called it, a church-mediated plea where truth might stitch fractures. Yet Holmes felt the stirrings anew, that veiled silhouette from the museum gates haunting his periphery, a shadow promising one last unraveling. Inside the courtroom, the air hung stale, laced with beeswax polish and the faint rot of fear sweat. Thorne sat in the dock, gaunt cheeks hollowed further by Newgate's gruel, his once sharp eyes dulled, but flickering with something raw, regret perhaps, or the ghost of cunning. Across the aisle his wife, Elias Hawthorne, gripped a lace handkerchief, her veil lifted now to reveal tear-streaked cheeks and eyes hollowed by betrayal. Their son, young Marcus, stood rigid beside her, the boy's fists balled as if holding back a tide. Gregson nodded from the prosecution bench, his bushy whiskers twitching in reluctant accord. Promotion secured, yet his pragmatism bent toward this mercy. Watson settled beside Holmes in the witness box, his limp more pronounced on the cold flags, mustache quivering as he murmured low, "Steady on, Holmes. Your words here. They're the bridge." Holmes met the judge's gaze, a stern cleric with a powdered wig that evoked Hawthorne's frailty. The curator himself waited in the gallery, velvet jacket traded for somber black, Bible peeking from his pocket like a talisman. Testimony began, voices echoing off oak panels. Thorne's forgery had flooded the Egyptian hall with fakes, luring Voss's cultish rites, hypnosis masked as curse, guards vanished into opium dens, not tombs. But the detective's voice faltered on the human cost, families shattered, faith mocked in shadowed sarcophagi. As Holmes detailed the counter-rite in the sublevels, incense and Voss's shattered chalice, a murmur rippled through the court. Eliza rose halfway, her voice breaking the hush. "He was lost, Mr. Holmes. The museum's gold blinded him. Can words undo that?" The detective paused, grey eyes locking on hers. "Words catalogue facts, madam, but scales, they weigh the soul." Thorne leaned forward, chains rattling softly. "You've seen my wreckage, Holmes. Church folk say grace covers it. If I own every lie." Holmes felt the vice tighten inwardly, his own compromises flashed, bending evidence to spare Marcus from juvenile cells, allying with Hawthorne's secretive faith over yard protocols. Reason demanded precision. This forgiveness blurred lines. Yet Marcus's gaze pleaded, the boy who'd chosen testimony over silence, stitching his own arc from accomplice to amends maker. The judge intoned mercy. Suspended sentence restitution via Thorne's labor at St. Giles Mission, family under church watch. Eliza sobbed as Thorne was led not to irons, but to her side, Marcus enfolding them both in trembling arms. Gregson clapped Holmes's back outside, ruddy face split in a rare grin. Clean close, eh? Faith's got teeth after all. But Holmes's chest constricted, pipe finally lit, smoke curling bitter. Clean. Shadows lingered. That afternoon, Baker Street welcomed them with hearth glow and Mrs. Hudson's stew, steam rising like absolution. Watson carved mutton, his blue eyes kind. You've woven logic with their grace, old chap. Thorne's family. They're mending because of it. Holmes paced before the fire, violin case unopened, fingers twitching for strings that might unravel the knot. Perhaps. Yet the veiled watcher at the gates, Thorne's sister-in-law, Voss's bloodkin, chalice law unextinguished. A knock shattered the quiet, sharp, insistent. Mrs. Hudson ushered in Dr. Hawthorne, spectacles fogged, face ashen. Holmes, it's the hall. Another guard swears he saw. Them? The vanished, in the fog. Watson's fork clattered. Superstition's echo? Hawthorne shook his head, voice quavering. No. Marcus. He's gone back to St. Giles, but Eliza sent word. The veil followed her home. And now, relics shifting in cases unopened since the trial. Holmes snatched his cape, pipe extinguished in the grate. The restoration fractures. Lead on. The museum loomed under gaslight. Egyptian hall a cavern of whispers, obelisks casting elongated claws. Constables milled uneasily, lanterns flickering. Thorne waited by the pedestal, Eliza at his elbow, Marcus pale but resolute. Gregson arrived breathless, revolver holstered. What devilry now? Holmes knelt by a sarcophagus, dust motes dancing in beam. Footprints, fresh, small, leading to the sublevels. Not Voss's cult. Her confession sealed that. But the veil. A cry echoed from below, Eliza's sharp with terror. They descended, air thickening with tomb dust and faint incense. In the ritual chamber, Marcus huddled over a figure. The veiled woman collapsed, chalice shards at her feet. Not sister, not kin. Inspector Lestrade's widow, Voss's final pawn, driven by grief-fueled madness to perpetuate the hoax for pension fraud. She gasped awake, eyes wild then clearing. The guards, alive, hidden in dens. I kept the lie for coin, forgive. Thorne knelt, voice steady for the first time. Scales evened, sister. Church'll hold you. Holmes watched, detachment shattering fully. Grace, not guile, closed the ledger, yet his mind raced, one loose thread. The vanishings complete but his soul's inventory. As they emerged into night, Thames fog rolling thick, Watson gripped his arm. You've helped another, Holmes. Marcus sees it, your potential beyond reason. The detective nodded, pipe relit, smoke mingling with mist. But restoration demands final test. That silhouette in the fog, it returns. Hours later, alone in Baker Street, Holmes stared at the fire's dying embers. Violin in hand at last, notes mournful then rising, reason's melody laced with faith's undertone. Watson slept soundly, but outside carriage wheels paused. A shadow crossed the pane, veiled no more. Hawthorne, bearing a relic fragment, etched with words Holmes had overlooked. The true curse. Holmes, not stone, but unforgiven hearts. Yours included. Dawn crept grey, pulling Holmes toward confrontation unspoken. The inner journey crested, but temptation's whisper echoed from the streets. One last unraveling beckoned, where scales would tip forever. Dawn's feeble light filtered through the heavy drapes of 221B Baker Street, casting long shadows across the cluttered room where Sherlock Holmes sat motionless, the violin still cradled in his lap. The final notes had hung in the air like a question unanswered, their melancholy vibrations stirring something deep within his chest, a raw ache he could no longer dismiss as mere fatigue. Dr. Elias Hawthorne's words echoed relentlessly. The true curse lay not in ancient stone but in unforgiven hearts, his own. Holmes's fingers tightened on the violin's neck, knuckles whitening. For years, he had dissected the world with scalpel-sharp logic, leaving his own soul pinned under glass, unobserved and untouched. A soft knock shattered the silence. Watson stirred from his armchair, rubbing sleep from his eyes, but Holmes rose first, striding to the door with purposeful grace. There stood Hawthorne, frailer than ever in the grey morning, his wire-rimmed spectacles fogged from the chill, a small linen-wrapped parcel clutched in trembling hands. Behind him, the street lay shrouded in the remnants of Thames fog, gas lamps flickering out like dying stars. "Come in, Doctor," Holmes said quietly, stepping aside. "The fire needs stoking, and so do we." Hawthorne entered, unwrapping the parcel on the scarred mahogany table. A shard of obsidian gleamed dully, etched with hieroglyphs that Holmes recognized instantly from the Egyptian hall, the very fragment he had dismissed weeks ago amid the frenzy of vanishing guards. The curator's voice cracked as he sank into a chair. "You overlooked it, Holmes, not through oversight but will. It speaks of Ma'at, truth and balance, the scales of the heart. Voss and her ilk twisted it for greed, but the warning was for us all. For you." Holmes leaned forward, pipe forgotten, his piercing grey eyes locking onto Hawthorne's faded blue ones. The room seemed to contract, the air thick with the scent of cold ash and old books. "What do you imply, Elias? Speak plainly." The old man sighed, fingers tracing the shard. 20 years passed when I unearthed the sarcophagus that started this nightmare. I buried a truth to protect the museum's reputation. A worker died, crushed by the lid, his family left destitute. I called it accident, hushed the inquiries, ambition over justice. And you? Baker Street whispers reached even my dusty office. The cases where ends justified means. The Reichenbach shadow, they say you bent laws, sacrificed allies for greater triumphs. Unforgiven ledgers, Holmes. The guard's hoax preyed on that guilt in you. A chill unrelated to the draft snaked through Holmes. His mind raced backward. The cocaine syringe hidden in the Persian slipper, the moral shortcuts in pursuit of Moriarty, Watson's unspoken wounds from their shared perils. Detached intellect had armored him, but now cracks spiderwebbed through. Watson, who had watched silently from the hearth, crossed the room, his limp more pronounced in the tension. "He's right, old chap. I've chronicled your genius, but seen the cost. The nights you vanished into fog, chasing shadows while I patched the human wreckage." Holmes stood abruptly, pacing to the window, where the street below stirred with early vendors hawking chestnuts and papers screaming of the museum's resolved curse. Grace, not guile, Thorne had said to the veiled woman. Was this his dark night extending into restoration? He turned, voice steady, but laced with uncharacteristic vulnerability. "Then we amend, all of us. The guards emerge today. Gregson's press conference at noon. But first, Hawthorne, your confession to them. And mine. To you, Watson. The 7% solution was no aid. It was escape from this." Watson clapped a hand on his shoulder, eyes misting. "About time, Holmes. Faith's not folly. It's the bridge reason couldn't build." Hawthorne nodded, parcel retied. "St. Mary's Sanctuary awaits. Thorne's group meets there mornings, fellow travellers like Marcus, Eliza. They've forgiven worse." The trio ventured out into the crisp air, horse-drawn hansom rattling them through waking London. Cobblestones gleamed wet from night rain, the spire of St. Mary's piercing the low clouds like a promise. The church nestled in Whitechapel shadows, its stone facade weathered by soot and sorrow, stained glass depicting scales of justice glowing faintly. Inside, the sanctuary breathed quiet redemption, polished oak pews worn smooth by penitence, incense lingering from vespers, a single candle guttering on the altar. Thorne waited near the vestry, his broad frame filling the doorway, Eliza beside him with a tray of steaming tea. Marcus hovered nearby, face no longer pale, but etched with quiet strength, his hands steady as he arranged hymnals. Inspector Gregson arrived moments later, rumpled suit traded for a somber black tie, revolver left at the yard. "Holmes, you hound." Gregson grunted, shaking hands all around. Guards are surfacing, Voss's dens cracked wide. But this amends? Never thought I'd see it. Thorne's voice rumbled warm, his distinctive lilt from dockside days softening the edges. "Scales tip with truth spoken, lads. Sit. Share." They gathered in a circle of chairs by the altar rail, the air heavy with vulnerability. Hawthorne spoke first, voice quavering as he recounted the buried death, the family's silenced grief. Tears carved tracks down his powdered cheeks. Forgiveness rippled outward, Eliza squeezing his hand, Marcus murmuring prayers. Then Holmes, unprompted, faced Watson across the dim light. The violin case at his feet felt like an anchor. "John, your loyalty masked my neglect. The cocaine dulled not just pain, but connection. The museum case. I chased reason to exercise my doubts, but it unearthed this void. Forgive the man who forgot his humanity." Watson's response came thick, his mustache twitching. "Forgiven long ago, Sherlock, but accepted now. That's the grace." Gregson shifted uncomfortably, then confessed his own rush to superstition for promotion, ignoring street whispers. Thorne nodded, sharing his temptation to relapse into old thefts amid the chaos. Marcus admitted doubts in his healing, Eliza her anger at Voss's web. One by one, ledgers balanced. Not perfectly, but enough to breathe freer. Outside, midday bells tolled as they emerged, the fog burned off by a hesitant sun. Reporters swarmed the museum steps, guards blinking into flash powder light, families reuniting in sobs and embraces. Holmes watched from afar, pipe relit, smoke curling heavenward. Restoration edged closer, yet his inner scales teetered. Watson nudged him. "One test remains, Holmes. The silhouette in the fog. It's no ghost. Reports from the docks, a final Voss ally fleeing with stolen relics. Temptation calls you back to lone pursuit." Holmes's eyes narrowed, the old fire sparking. But not alone. "Thorne. Marcus. With me." Thorne grinned, clapping his back. "Community's the chain that holds." As they plunged into the bustling docks, warehouses looming like ancient tombs, a figure darted through crates, cloaked, desperate, clutching a satchel of obsidian shards. The chase tightened, hearts pounding in unison, Holmes's mind alight not just with deduction, but shared resolve. The suspect whirled in a dead-end alley, satchel spilling relics into the muck. Not Voss's pawn, but Hawthorne's long-lost son, returned for vengeance over the buried accident. Face twisted in rage, he lunged with a shard like a dagger. Holmes dodged, voice cutting through. "Your father's confessed, all forgiven, join the scales." The man faltered, shard dropping, sobs racking him. Thorne restrained gently, Marcus offering a handkerchief. Grace enveloped the scene, raw and real. Back at St. Mary's that evening, Hawthorne embraced his son, the church aglow with Vesper's light. Holmes stood apart with Watson, violin case heavy in hand. "You've turned the ledger, old friend," Watson whispered. "But the final entry awaits," Holmes murmured, gaze drifting to the fog-shrouded streets beyond. "One shadow lingers, my deepest unforgiven sin. Moriarty's echo demands reckoning before true restoration dawns." The gas lamps flickered like dying stars along Baker Street, casting long shadows that clawed at the cobblestones. Holmes paced the sitting room of 221B, the violin case still unopened on the table, its wood scarred from years of neglect. Watson sat by the fire nursing a brandy, his limp more pronounced in the chill evening air that seeped through the cracks. The weight of the day's graces hung between them, Hawthorne's son redeemed, Voss's web unraveled. But Holmes's mind churned, pulled inexorably toward the shadow that no logic could banish. "You can't outrun it forever, old chap," Watson said softly, his voice steady as the tick of the mantel clock. "Moriarty's not just a name in your ledger, he's the crack in your foundation." Holmes stopped, pipe clenched between his teeth, unlit. His grey eyes, usually sharp as scalpels, dulled with the fog of memory. Moriarty. Professor James Moriarty, the Napoleon of crime, whose intellect had mirrored his own, twisted into a labyrinth of evil. Their final confrontation at Reichenbach Falls echoed in his skull. The roar of the water, the grip of desperate hands, the choice he'd made not to save, but to destroy. It wasn't justice, he'd told himself then. It was necessity. But in the quiet hours, Doubt whispered, "Murderer." "I bent the law once to uphold it," Holmes replied, voice low, almost a growl, "and the world slept safer." "What absolution do you seek for that?" Watson leaned forward, the firelight etching lines deeper into his face. "Absolution isn't earned by deduction, Holmes. It's claimed through confession. St. Mary's waits. Thorns offered the space. No judgment, just truth." Holmes turned away, staring into the flames that danced like the fall's spray. Thorne. The vicar had appeared mid-case, a sturdy man in his 50s with a sailor's weathered hands and eyes that saw through pretense, drawn to the museum's chaos by whispers of a curse. He'd spoken not of ancient Egyptian hexes, but of modern souls ensnared. Guards vanished not by Anubis, but by Voss's smuggling ring, tempted by bribes and buried debts. Thorne had seen Holmes's detachment fray, the detective's cocaine haze lifting only when Faith's quiet logic pierced the opium den of his mind. "Not tonight," Holmes muttered. The streets call. That final silhouette at the docks, Voss's courier or Moriarty's ghost? Watson rose, hand on his shoulder. "It's you calling yourself out. Eliza's waiting too. She's forgiven much. Now witness her strength." Elias Hawthorne, the curator's daughter, mid-30s with raven hair pinned severely and hands calloused from years tending the museum's fragile relics. She'd been Voss's unwitting pawn once, her grief over lost guards fueling rage that nearly consumed her. Now, in reconciliation's fragile light, she stood as fellow traveller, her arc from bitterness to quiet mercy mirroring Holmes's own teetering path. The door to St. Mary's creaked open under a sliver of moonlight, the nave empty save for the scent of polished oak and melting wax. Thorne stood at the altar, Bible open, his broad frame silhouetted against stained glass that depicted prodigal sons returning. Marcus lingered in a pew, the young ex-guard whose own temptation had led him into Voss's traps. Lean, scarred jaw, eyes now clear with hard-won sobriety. Eliza knelt nearby, her prayer whispered like a balm. Holmes entered last, Watson at his side, the door thudding shut like a verdict. The air hummed with silence, broken only by the distant chime of Big Ben tolling 11. Thorne turned, his voice warm as hearth coals. "The ledger's final page, Mr. Holmes. No relics here, no curses. Just the heart." Holmes approached the altar, fingers tracing the Bible's leather edge. His Inverness cape shed droplets from the drizzle outside, pooling like tears. "Moriarty," he began, the word tasting of ash. 5 years passed, at Reichenbach. I pushed him to his death. Not in fair combat, but calculation. The falls claimed him and a piece of me. Silence stretched, heavy as fog. Marcus shifted, his own hands trembling faintly, remembering nights in the Egyptian hall.